Chapter 176. Is it better to start first? It's not impossible, since the people of Wakanda believe that they can fight. Then the number of dark elves should not be too much, otherwise they dare not be so decisive. Although Anson intended to arrange for them to come here to deal with the dark elves, there was always another choice. Arrived a week later. Anson paused. The use value of the dark elves was not much. Even the dark elves in the original play being able to enter Asgard may be the component of Odin's intention to release water, otherwise, their battleship would have been shattered before they got close. The Rainbow Bridge is not a decoration. With the presence of the humanoid radar of Haidaml, it is simply easy to cooperate with who the Rainbow Bridge wants to hit. However, even if it is put in, the extent of damage that the Dark Elves can do to Asgard is extremely limited. How do you arrange 607? We don't know where they landed at the moment, but it would be nice if there was something we could do to attract them. Kala looked at Anson. If you want to do this, only the mysterious wizard can. Yes. What are the Dark Elves after? In addition to retaliating against Asgard, it is the ether particle reality gem. At that time, as long as some of the energy of the reality gems is released on the Earth, and the Dark Elves land in this dimension, the only way for them to quickly enter the Earth is only one: enter through the passage, or enter through the channel generated when the 9 realms converge. But either can help Wakanda determine the location of the Dark Elves. After discussing some specific matters, Anson returned to Earth. Mr. Spencer, bring back the 500 elite mages who hunted the Skuru. I'm afraid we will have to make a move this time. They also need to familiarize themselves with the methods of using wizarding methods to deal with the power of the technological side. Otherwise, when Anson wants to go into space or farther away to carry out activities in the future, wizards may not be able to be invincible. Spencer, okay young master. Then, does the first wizard legion stationed in Wakanda need to transfer some people over? It can now be automated except for wizards. It doesn't take many people. After the transfer of the Wakanda people, the wizards only existed as a security force in the Wakanda area. Anson shook his head. No thanks, 500 is enough. 4 later, Princess Skuru had detected that those ships were rapidly approaching and arrived on the Dark Elf home star early tomorrow morning. Day 5. The Dark Elves descend on the home planet, with 100 small ships and 1 large ship. The weapon unit is unknown, and the number of personnel is conservatively estimated to exceed 1 million, plus the number of Dark Elves that have already been discovered by Wakanda on the home planet. The known population of Dark Elves is at least over 5 million. Earth. Far from the passage, Jian and his group were sitting in the car, and various instruments for detecting energy had been ringing non-stop. Daisy opened her mouth. God, this energy response is not much weaker than the Rainbow Bridge, right? Thor shrugged. Jane, incredible. Thor, didn't you say that this is a rare celestial phenomenon? Yes, the 9 realms convergence. It stands to reason that it is difficult for ordinary people to see it once in their lifetime, and I have seen it for the first time. You seem a little worried? Daisy asked curiously as she licked the lollipop. Thor had to worry, but he couldn't say what he was worried about. The 9 realms convergence. In the information recorded by Asgard alone, each of its appearances will be accompanied by disasters of varying degrees. The convergence of the 9 realms means that at this time, some form of channel interconnection will be formed in the 9 realms, and it is possible to directly enter other dimensions from the Earth. For example, once the passage is fully open, it can even enter Asgard directly from Earth. He had asked Haidaml why this phenomenon occurred, and Haidaml only said that it was related to the World Tree, and he wanted to ask Haidaml but did not want to continue. Jane saw Thor showing a solemn look and became a little worried. Is there any danger? It's not good to say. Anson appeared in that place, Jane also disappeared in that place, and according to Haidaml, the only possible thing was that the passage generated by the convergence of the 9 realms was there. But Anson didn't have a good impression on him in the past. He was worried about what Anson wanted to do. Energy burst. On the instrument, a huge energy wave swept out from that building, and the value alone had reached a terrifying level. This is what energy? Thor wanted to go out with a hammer. Jane grabbed him. Where are you going? I have to go and see. This energy should not be the energy wave generated by the convergence of the 9 realms. You can rest assured, it will be fine. Jane called out to him again. Aren't you some Avengers person? You can't do it alone when something like this happens, right? I mean, it might be better to have your teammates around. Thor was silent. Makes sense. Closing parenthesis, flicked the hammer and rushed into the sky and disappeared. Daisy, don't look at me. I don't want to get involved in your weird things. God, I don't just want to study quietly. 3 curved wing building. With a loud bang, Thor smashed through the glass and appeared directly in front of Fury. Fury was still holding a 4-corner sandwich, but it was covered in ash. Mr. Thor, I thought that the people of the Divine Domain should be more polite. There is no effort to talk to you. Your world is in big trouble. Fury took a bite of the sandwich unhurriedly, his face enjoying it. Big trouble? Same as the last alien war in the last button. Probably more troublesome. Well, a cautious look flowed from Fury's one-eyed eyes. Tell me about it. Finish speaking. Fury put down the sandwich. So, You mean that the so-called 9 realms will appear a channel in Series 5.6 to each other, and Anson has something in his hands that villains want and must? Good. Magifake. The screen returns to the world building. Anson withdrew the reality gem and was wrapped in the trunk of the world tree and hung on his chest. Makers, who was far away in the dark elven dimension, was listening to the rewards of his subordinates. Well, the relics of my people are calling us. Our time. Here it comes. Sir, the target is on Earth. If we want to cross the void, I am afraid it will take a long time to reach it at the speed of the spaceship. Malakis, what do you think? We can pass through the passage generated by the convergence of the 9 realms, but it will take a few days, or from there. No, that passage is a backhand. It can't be exposed now. Wait for the 9 realms to converge. Chapter 177. He didn't know that the so-called passage of the Dark Elves had been discovered by the Asgardians thousands of years ago, and now it was used by Anson. Earth, outside the passage of the world. How long have they been here? It's been there since the morning, and I've been probing the interior of the building in various ways. Young master, do you need to set up a mole banishment charm? Quirrell asked. Anson shook his head. This group of shield people came really quickly. It seemed that everyone had already arrived. Even Stark was already wearing his battle armor and waiting. Moreover, the leader is that Hayla's unlucky brother. Sir, he's out. Anson appeared outside, and Fury, who was waiting here, breathed a sigh of relief. Anson, what are you doing here? Stark raised his hand. Hey Wanda, Pietro, long time no see. Pietro didn't even look at him, but Wanda nodded casually. Fury, Thor told us about the situation here, and we thought it was necessary to come and support. After all, more strength should not be a bad thing. Not necessarily. Anson thought of something and suddenly smiled. Are you sure? Of course, Stark said unimpressed. Whoever wants to attack Earth will have to pass through me 18. Anson, you should be able to trust us. If you ask for it, come in. Turning to Quirrell, who turned to the side, he ordered, arrange the Mole expulsion charm within 10 kilometers of the building. Yes, young master. Mole banishment curse? If Stark remembered correctly, Anson used this spell when he fought against the Iron Overlord. It seems to be a spell that allows ordinary people to leave on their own, meaning, the combat range will be large. Following Fury's glance, he felt pitted. This time, except for the people who came to the Avengers, they brought some shield agents, and they didn't even have heavy weapons. Just ordered his men to go down and transfer people over, but were told that the signal was blocked. Dry. Anson, we need to bring some people over just in case. You see? It's okay. The enemy who came this time should not be too strong, and it can handle it with the combat power of your Avengers. Seriously? Black Widow asked mischievously. Anson showed a mouthful of white teeth. I generally don't lie to people. Thor is not as easy as them. No matter which realm of the 9 realms is overcome, no matter what the Earthlings can deal with, although Asgard nominally rules all. But not everyone gave him the face of the people of the Divine Domain. Do you know who is coming? Malekith. Stark raised an eyebrow. Malekith. It seems to be a kind of food, and our enemy this time is food. On the building, with the arrangement of the mole banishment curse, the flow of people on the street has begun to be seen leaving the area. Fury watched curiously. Magical witchcraft. Anson, can this kind of witchcraft of yours be popularized? Wanda, you don't have to think about it. You don't have this qualification, and your age is over, and the average little wizard should be determined when he is 11 years old. Of course, there are some exceptions. As time went by, the energy fluctuations inside the building became stronger and stronger. Moreover, the energy fluctuations visible to the naked eye spread like water streaks, until when it was at its maximum, Black Widow quickly pulled out her small pistol. Attention, something is coming. Another place was visible in the open white passage, but the next second the passage was quickly covered with something black. Slowly, everyone opened their mouths. This is alien spaceship? Hawkeye's hand pulling the bow was lowered. How does this make him fight? Stark composed his face. Ha! This is what you call the enemy in general? Anson spread out his hand. You have to mix in. Don't say I don't give a chance. As he spoke, the 3 spaceships directly entered the interior of the Earth after the passage reached the maximum, and before they could fly far, they quickly turned the spacecraft and stopped in the airspace outside the building. Dozens of tall, skinny aliens with grey skin landed on the lawn. Pointy ears, obviously different from human shape. Dark elves? Thor grimaced. Rumble. Mina swung and smashed him into Malekith, who was standing at the front. Anson quietly watched the Avengers and his party fight with the Dark Elves. Waving his hand, 500 elite wizards and Wanda and the others had entered the passage and disappeared. Dark Elf Home Star. As soon as everyone appeared, they saw that countless Wakanda spaceships had taken off and quickly rushed into the distance, and took out flying vehicles similar to motorboats in the bag where they cast the traceless stretching charm. The crowd hurried to follow. Closing parenthesis in the distance, I saw the golden-white spaceship of Wakanda fighting with the Dark Elves in the distance. Energy rays spread throughout the battlefield. Due to the sudden attack on the Wakanda side, most of the Dark Elves were killed before they could react. If it weren't for the appearance of some taller and more powerful cursed warriors in the Dark Elf spaceship later, I am afraid that they would have been taken away by a wave of blows. Wanda frowned. This should be the highest technique of the Dark Elves, that Anson said, cursing the warriors, killing them first, and preventing the Dark Elves from escaping into the universe. Understood. Pietro, be careful yourself. Don't worry, Sue. As soon as the words fell, the person had turned into an afterimage and disappeared, and in the distance, a large number of Wakanda soldiers were fighting with the warriors of the Dark Elves. Not only is there a battle in the air, but even the ground is in a state of glue. Avada nibbles on a big melon, falling apart, raging fire. T'Challa saw the wizard wearing magic robes appear in the air, and immediately shouted excitedly, "Our support has arrived. Long live Wakanda." 757 Long live Wakanda. Wanda floated in the air, and as soon as two clouds of yin red energy condensed in her hand, she directly threw it out. Every dark elf who wanted to get close to her was directly annihilated by the energy mass. Pulling out his wand, loud voice, "All the dark elves here vomit." In the next second, Pietro, who was running, did not have time to react, and was directly vomited by a dark elf on the side. After a knife. Raise your hand to signal Wanda. I don't blame you for that. Earth. Anson stroked the cat, and Hayla looked at Saul's performance on the battlefield with interest. Gee, it's still the same old way of cultivation. It's a pity. He hasn't seen the real battlefield, and to be honest, it's impossible for someone like him to inherit Asgard. The entire Avengers beat Malekith and it was only a tie. It's a bit disappointing. However, people are now bursting. The American team in battle heard someone telling the enemy leader that his home had been stolen, and although he didn't know what it meant, he definitely couldn't let these aliens leave here. Attention, surround him. Black Widows, let's go clean up the miscellaneous soldiers. Spencer happened to come to Anson. Young master, some shield agents have left. We monitored their calls. It is Hydras. Chapter 178. Meow. The grunt in his arms made the cry before Anson came back to his senses. He couldn't figure out how such a character later won Thanos. Could it be that the characters of Thanos' subordinates are the same as Malekith's? This is not normal. A figure who can leave a great name among interstellar civilizations will definitely not be able to do it if he only relies on personal courage and might. And it's important to note that Thanos didn't have the Infinity Stones in the first place. Anson can only think that the current Avengers are not the future Avengers, and perhaps they still need to grow. How? Do you have an idea? Halo asked. It's kind of boring to watch them here. I think I will meet the Dark Elves. What do you think? It's long overdue. Anson turned his head. Mr. Spencer, here you see, if they mess around, they can call our security forces. It should be enough to deal with them. Of course, young master. Spencer bowed slightly. Anson and Hayla take Gwyril into the passage to Swaitfheim, the land of the Dark Elves. The battle here is much more intense than on Earth. Oh, it looks like a lot of people in Wakanda have died. On the battlefield, the battle for air superiority alone goes on every moment. Due to the large number of Dark Elves on the ground, most of the Dark Elf ships cannot take off to escape and use mass destruction attacks. Of course, people don't seem to be able to manage this when they get angry. This little witch is really good, Hayla said, looking at Wanda flying in the air. The one-hand probability impact directly covers all the Dark Elves. Don't look at the small means of just making them vomit, but any negligence on the battlefield will lead to death. The corners of Anson's mouth rose. Quite proud. This is not her complete body. The potential of a witch who can kill through the Avengers and Thanos at the peak of hard steel is undoubted. Those are the wizards of the Dark Elves. Anson saw that there were some Dark Elves on the battlefield who used abilities that were not the same as regular Dark Elves, all of which were technological creations. Instead, it had obvious mysterious side power fluctuations, and was fighting with the 500 elite wizards he had brought over. Hayla looked over and was slightly disgusted. This level of mysterious side power is much worse than the wizards under you. Their elite has long been killed by Odin's old guy, otherwise why do you think they wandered? However, if you want something like their wizarding code, you may be able to look for it on this planet. Asgard doesn't get much of their heritage. Eyes lit up. Then he's not welcome. Goo, you can eat enough today. With his right hand pulling back, he violently threw the Yuan-devouring beast golem onto the battlefield. Meow. In the air, Goo opened his mouth after adjusting his figure, and the dense octopus-like tentacles reached out in his mouth, rolled several Dark Elves, swallowed them and disappeared. The same goes for Anson. After opening his mouth and roaring, he turned into a huge flying dragon and appeared on the battlefield. Roar! Everywhere he passed, it was covered by a huge dragon flame, and its temperature was a little more powerful than the spell used by the wizard. And this flame cannot yet be extinguished. Several warships found that Gugu appeared on the battlefield out of thin air and flew directly over with Anson. A glance at the huge dragon's eye, that distinctly human mocking expression appeared on the dragon's head. Flap your wings, whoops. A few minutes faster appeared under the battleship, and the figure turned, and the dragon wings slashed through the battleship like sharp steel knives, like cutting tofu. Below the battlefield, the people of Wakanda were stunned. Oki muttered, "Is this still the power that humans should have?" The Black Panther armor created for him by Kalawara Skuru was silent for a moment, and a dark elf warrior who casually tore off the side. "Skuru, how much strength does the other party have?" Skuru, who presided over the battle in the rear, was also under great pressure. "At present, the other party's living power we have scanned is still at least 500,000, and the dark elves on this planet themselves are also rushing towards this place. It's difficult." Outside, you can vaguely see the new dark elves who are coming to support, and there are quite a few of them. In the form of the Anson dragon, although it is powerful and can use spells, it has poor manpower. What spell is best used involving hundreds of thousands of enemies? If it is uncontrollable, the fire charm is the best to use. If it is to be controlled, then the weather spell is undoubtedly the most suitable. Loud voice. All elite wizards leave the battlefield and set up weather spells. Novels. Just go to Felu closing parenthesis swish, swish. After retreating from the front to the rear, hundreds of wizards use the weather spell, which was etched on their souls. Just like their instincts, in addition to bonuses, they also increase their power due to the increase in mana. Thundered. A bolt of lightning came out of thin air. The sweet flame, which should have been dim, became even darker at this time, and even the sunlight from outside the planet was blocked. Thundered. Another lightning bolt. Boom. Bang. The thick lightning fell to the ground like a spear, hitting the dark elves with precision, and those warships that were supposed to fight the Wakanda spacecraft in the sky were taken care of by the dense lightning in the first place. Skuru hurriedly shouted, "All spaceships withdraw from the sky." This was followed by a scene that subverted the three views. Dense lightning bolts appeared, and with each blow, a spaceship or a dark elf fell to the ground. Roar! Several dark elven cursed warriors roared and resisted the lightning blow, wanting to rush over and kill the wizard in the rear. They knew that this series of phenomena must have been caused by those guys in black robes behind. "How?" T'Challa shouted angrily, "Don't let them come." The Wakanda soldiers of the border tribes wielded vibranium spears, and weapons were thrown and scattered, firing energy rays. However, this still does not help cursing the warrior. "Haila, outdated stuff." Scold. A jump appeared at the front of the battlefield, hands flicked to the sides, and two swords of the night sky were directly inserted into the chest of the cursed warrior at great speed. But it was just a little plugged in. "Huh? So, submit." One after another, the swords of the night sky were summoned out of thin air and thrown out as if they did not need capital, and the cursed warrior who rushed to the front was inserted into a hedgehog a second later. Unwilling to fall. "If it weren't for the divine power, don't seal it." Turning his head and scolding, "Fools, what are you still looking at?" The Wakanda soldiers on the side continued to turn on the energy gun. In the sky, Anson squinted. He felt that Haila would not pull her crotch like she said. This dog is very good at hiding. Chapter 179. On the other side. The Earth. Team America gasped. "He seems to be more impatient. It seems that something has happened." "Stark, Captain, we all have eyes." "Not only is it more manic, but his strength is also stronger. If it weren't for the 3 battleships he brought over with the Hulk, they don't necessarily feel better." Seeing that more and more of his subordinates are dying, Malachus is alone and will definitely explode. The worst thing is that news has been coming from the rear. It is said that some mysterious force is striking them, and even the cursed warrior cannot bear it. Odin was blind. How is this possible? But now he is still stopped by these damn bugs, and he can't go back if he wants to, so he has no choice but to let the people in the battleship give the order to send the spaceship to support first. As for whether he can wait for support, only the devil knows. Fury appeared next to Spencer on the building. "Sir, I'm afraid we need your help." "Oh? I don't know what kind of help Mr. Fury wants." Fury made a calm face. "We applied for a large number of agents to enter the area and warplanes to enter the area like the British authorities, but they refused." Spencer, That's 883 normal. That's what I asked for." Fury froze. Spencer smiled. "This is not normal. S.H.I.E.L.D. is limited by the Big Five, and the Pendra family has close ties with many of the Big Five. This is our territory, sir. But if there are no weapons of mass destruction entering, it will be difficult for us to take him, and once the Avengers are damaged, it will be a huge loss for the Earth." Spencer pretended to regret. "That's a pity. Or, I will give them a medal or something. Of course, the reward will not be less." Wrinkling his eyebrows, "Well, how exactly do you get them in?" "Sir, you seem to be mistaken. It's not me who refuses you to enter. Look at the fights. Superhero battles are not always visible." Smiling, Fury once again dislikes everything around Anson. Heck, he wants to see all the whole cards of the Avengers. "Or what do you want to do?" According to his existing knowledge of Anson, he has enough strength to take down the ugly alien below. But now I don't even know where people are. "Major fake." The cry of Black Widow Natasha from the battlefield came from the headset. Notice what he just injected himself. A pipe fell from Malachus's hand, and at this moment his figure was rapidly soaring, and Thoth, the god of thunder, fell. Blurted out, "Cursed warrior of the Dark Elves?" "Impossible. Have they improved their technology to this point?" Hawkeye took the bow and shot, speak human language. Stark, he's getting stronger. Cool. Malekith seemed to have eaten a few pounds of fodder, and his figure skyrocketed, and he became even uglier. Clenching his fists, as if there were countless forces swimming in his muscles, he grinned viciously. Swish! The footsteps made a rumbling sound on the ground, and in the blink of an eye, they came to the Avenger and slammed down with a punch. Roar! Black Widow watched the fist in her pupils get closer and closer, but her body did not react at all, or she was shocked. The Hulk roared and pushed her away, his right fist right. SHHH. After the silent voice, the two took a few steps back. Without exception, there are a few more footholds in the ground, which shows the great power. Malleus twisted his body and no longer came towards the Hulk, but ran towards the building on the side. This one. Spencer doesn't follow him. Wave your hand. Security forces, which have long been prepared on the side, have appeared in droves. On one side is a huge figure that is at least more than 3 meters. On one side are hundreds of security personnel, but the strong body and explosive muscles are not to be underestimated. Thor shook his head. No, 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 you are not his opponent. Get out of the way. The next second, the two touched. Malleus thought that his random wave of power would be able to shatter the weak bug in front of him, but when their power came into contact, he found out things weren't what he imagined. Bang bang. Dense fists hit him, painful. But his power to strike at these humans that should have killed them seemed to be weakened, and why was their endurance so strong? He does not understand. Stark, it seems to be vibranium. You mean the clothes they wear are made of vibranium? Black Widow asked. Stark's armor landed. I don't have any other explanation, and Anson seems to have a technology in his hands to transform humans into extraordinary powers that can be used against them. That's how they should have come. From above, Fury looked hot. At first, he also wanted to trade this kind of transformation technology with Anson, but unfortunately it didn't work. One punch at the security personnel. People flew to the side and continued to run over as if they were fine. Malekith, on the other hand, is limited by speed visible to the naked eye, and to some extent, this force can already eat any Avenger except the Hulk. And it's easy. Beyond admiration is fear. Deep jealousy. Team America, this power should not be in the hands of careerists. Stark sneered. Captain, in your eyes they are careerists, in their eyes you are probably too. Okay everyone, let's just watch. Hawkeye shrugged. I'm not his opponent anyway. Black Widow was silent. The two pistols were not one shot, the other was called. She was just a mortal who lived longer. Damn superpowers. 10 minutes. Someone went up to report Spencer. Mr. Spencer, the target has been taken. How to deal with it? Hall appeared directly. Mr. Spencer, Hall is at your service. Well, go control that guy and wait for the young master to come back and deal with it. Understood. Coming to the trapped Malekith, Stark exaggeratedly complained. Even the ropes are made of vibranium, and I have reason to suspect that they have more vibranium in their hands. Hall raised his little wand. Faint, faint, faint. After a while, the cursed warrior that Malekith turned into finally fell asleep. The command security personnel said, lock him with vibranium material, and then you can get back to work. Closing parenthesis. Yes. As for these guys on the side, Spencer paused. Everyone, I'm afraid you can't leave until the young master returns. Come back. Fury, where did he go? Spencer looked at Thor. Your Excellency Thor, do you think that the Dark Elves will only have one leader? You mean? Wars are going on in bigger battlefields, and we're protecting the planet. Fury said again. That's just right. We can also help. S.H.I.E.L.D. agents cannot go, and the Avengers should meet the conditions. Spencer laughed. This guy seems to have noticed the abnormality in S.H.I.E.L.D. Chapter 180. Nope. Below, the Avengers and his party are guarded here, while Stark in the Warframe is watching the data obtained by Jarvis invasion. Hiss. Oh, God. Black Widows. Is there anyone who makes gasping and crying out to God? Team America shook his head. Number. Hawkeye slapped Stark in the armor. Is that you? I don't think the Great Iron Man would have cried out to God. After all, there should be no such thing in the worldview of scientists. Bang. The armor's mask opens. Stark, who had a slightly ugly face, twisted a smile. Of course. How can the Great Iron Man pump? It is impossible. This is absolutely impossible. In the next second, his face became even more ugly. Fury asked keenly, what did you find? You won't want to know. I won't say, and you'd better not know, or you'll die. Team America frowned slightly, and the shield in his hand was set aside. I thought we were already comrades in arms. Huh? Comrade in arms? Do you think that if you block several disasters together, you are comrades in arms? Your mind is still stuck before, Captain. Don't want to talk anymore. He didn't know what to say. A country more powerful than the world knew it, was controlled by the Pendra family. Shocked. Moreover, there is even so much vibranium output. What would happen if Anson mined and manufactured all this vibranium into weapons? And with what strength will they resist himself? Vibranium is unsolvable. to some extent. Judging from the strength of those security guarantees just now, even creating a thin layer of vibranium clothing is not something that conventional forces can destroy, not to mention that the security itself is very strong. Such a force is extremely destructive wherever it appears. Hidden Trouble, Team America, Black Widow, Hawkeye. They are pure fighters or agents. Ignored. Hulk. His strength is indeed strong enough, but the power under Anson is not only those, but there are more powers that they may not discover. The mind turns 1,000 times. Tap tap. Knocking downstairs and standing alone in front of Stark, slightly embarrassed. Mr. Stark, Mr. Spencer please, you alone. Guys, I'll come when I go. Natasha, what do you say he found? With his personality, he should have discovered the existence of forces that we can't deal with to have such a reaction. Hawkeye was sure of this. Fury shook his head. Upstairs. Spencer narrowed his eyes. Mr. Stark, I don't think it's a good move to hack into someone else's database without permission. How do you think we can't find out? According to the relevant laws, we have the right to kill you. No way. Those data are simply not comparable to a great Stark. Slowly. The more you speak, the quieter you get. Shrugged. Okay, I hacked into your database, but what exactly are you trying to do? Controlling Wakanda to get their vibranium shouldn't be your ultimate goal. Spencer's voice changed. Mr. Stark, do you know this universe? Universe? That's right, the universe. It's vast and mysterious, with a lot of things we don't know about and the existence or civilizations, as evidenced by the Skuru people and the current Dark Elves. Brows frowned. You guys want to use vibranium to build a defensive force? If I were to say, no one knows vibranium and the use of it better than I do. What about the Wakandas? Stark, so they were transferred by you? That's right. It's over there. You want to see it? Sweet fine. Skuru saw Stark appear, and fell. How did you let him come? Spencer, he hacked into our database and got something, which is it can be regarded as someone who is of some use. You seem to know me. Princess Skuru. Skuru smiled. Of course, it's just that your memory has been modified. Novels. Go on fellow. Closing parenthesis. Stark turned to look at Spencer, but no one looked at him at all. Well, it must have been done by a wizard under Anson. If you say so, I am afraid that I have also been to Wakanda. Outside, Skuru waved his hand to project away, and the dense thunder snakes in the sky were constantly falling, and one dark elf after another was killed. The wizard said that this is a spell called a large weather spell, and it is very powerful. God, this kind of spell had been seen by him during the Battle of New, and its power, needless to say, was very suitable for use on such a large-scale battlefield. That's the head dragon? Skuru shook his head directly. No, that's Anson. Anson? He's not human? Spencer coughed, and Stark immediately changed his words. Oh, mysterious witchcraft. Stark quietly stood in front of Skuru. In other words, do you really have so much vibranium? It's gone. The expression was lonely. The dragon streaked across the sky and descended outside, and Haidaml and Anson returned to their appearance as a wizard robe. Want to see your father? I said this for no reason. Just now, Anson heard a voice appear in his ears out of thin air. It was Haidaml, saying that Odin had asked him to reminisce. Haidaml's momentum was a little stronger. She could feel that Odin was reaching his limit. Look at him. No need. Let's go. He is now banished to Earth by Loki. I'm afraid he won't have the chance to see it in the future. Although I don't know what else Asgard can do to make people live forever. So what about here? It's not that Anson looks down on these dark elves, but their limits come to this. In this battle, at least more than half of the dark elves became corpses, and the rest of them probably didn't have much strength. And so it goes. The Wakanda can be said to have direct control of the planet, which is equivalent to his mastery of the planet. With Skuru and Wakanda's scientific research ability, it may not take long to fully analyze the Dark Elf's technology. Interstellar voyages are not a problem anymore. As soon as he arrived at the entrance of the passage, he saw that Stark was also here, and turned his head to look at Spencer, who was standing on the side. After explaining the matter, Anson also felt a little difficult. I said you can't change this petty theft. Stark pouted. Don't talk nonsense. Who calls me tech-savvy? But I don't blame you. Mr. Spencer, leave him here. Let him and Skuru strengthen the transformation here, and let him go back when it is finished. Immediately said solemnly, as for those you know, I advise you to better know it yourself. Otherwise, I don't mind making you regret it. Of course, who doesn't know that Stark is the most trustworthy? Anson, you're getting so fast. Chapter 181 Novi Seaside. Anson brought Haidaml here, and once Haidaml was also here at the mouth of the passage of Hades in Hades, and Novi is also one of the origins of the legendary Odin god lineage. It can be said that it has a lot of origin. One of the things that has always puzzled Anson the most is that Asgard has such a long lifespan but its body cannot support the strength that grows with time. In Anson's opinion, this is very abnormal. By this reasoning, this means that the Asgardians have a force entering their bodies at every moment. Be their power. This will cause their bodies to eventually be unable to support the surge in strength. So the question is, what is the source of this force? Anson once speculated that it was the mysterious Valhalla of the Asgardian system, and he guessed that the Asgardians should also enter Valhalla after death. As for what method 767 relies on, it is still unknown. Words will be energy. Later, Anson thought carefully, maybe it was not Valhalla, but the most common thing in the 9 realms. World Tree. As we all know, the World Tree runs through the entire 9 realms, and its own energy is no less than an infinity stone, or even more secretive. Even Anson speculated that Asgard's Rainbow Bridge technology was built on the World Tree. It is only the power of the World Tree that is used. Otherwise, the energy that the Rainbow Bridge can strike and explode stars is too large, which is completely not something that the continent of Asgard can provide. Where did Odin get this technique in the first place? On the cliff by the sea, an old man was seen sitting on a stone in the distance. It's Odin. Anson turned to look at Haidaml. Don't say anything. Haidaml rolled her eyes, looking indifferent. He walked over and bowed slightly. Your Excellency God King. Ah, Master Anson, I've got you to come over. Odin is relaxed, at least for the moment. In Anson's eyes, the energy on Odin's body has reached a kind of transformation, the kind that is about to overflow, and even the cracked lines can be faintly seen on his body. The whole person is like a porcelain that is about to crack. It breaks when touched. An astonishing total amount of divine power. Odin pointed to the 2 infinity stones hanging on Anson's chest. Excessive pursuit of powers beyond one's control may be a disaster. Ancient Mage, when I was young, I was like you, pursuing power, pursuing things that we didn't understand whether there was meaning or value, and the results were obvious. Anson was silent. I don't know if His Excellency the God King called me over. What do you think of the future of the 9 realms? The God King wants to know how I treat Asgard. No, Asgard will have its own future, but you know, an old man is always worried about the future of future generations. As long as Thor and they don't get mixed in, I shouldn't be interested in mixing with them. Odin nodded. That's enough. How's Haidaml? What do you mean? Odin smiled. She is a pure warrior, but not a qualified king. I am sure of this. I put her by your side in the hope that you can guide her. Is this a deal? If you can, of course. Talked to Odin for a long time, until Thor and Loki appeared. The two hid in the shadows and watched Odin turn into golden light and disappear. Haidaml sighed. He could have been greater, but he was afraid. Anson did not comment on this. Back in Svartalfheim, the affairs of the Dark Elves are already being closed, and a large number of Dark Elves on the planet are being captured by the Wakanders. The total is more than 1 million, and there are only ones. And the king of the Dark Elves, Malekith, on the throne of Wakanda. Anson sat on it. Dead, or alive. Malekith was bound by vibranium and could not move, but the sneer on his face did not hide a single point. I don't know where the brat came from. Do you think life and death can scare me? Anson shook his head. Of course not, Your Excellency Malekith. I mean your people. Please note that the decisions you make now will represent their future. You mean? So what? Closing parenthesis. It was as if all his strength had been drained, and although he lost this battle, he still had more clansmen alive on the home planet. You can't just die like that. What do you want to do? Anson smiled. It's very simple. I think you know her. Oh, Haidaml, it seems that Odin's old guy is no longer a good one, the luck of the 9 realms. How about you take the remaining Dark Elves to attack Asgard? Malekith's eyes widened, turning back and forth from Anson and Haidaml. He really couldn't figure it out. According to his understanding, Haidaml could not be here now, but if he did, Odin would definitely die. But according to Haidaml's previous style of doing things, now that she is out of trouble, she should directly occupy Asgard. How can she be with a group of humans here? What the hell do you do? Anson, 2 things. First, you take your people to attack Asgard, and second, the God Queen Frigga must die. Is there a problem? What do I get? Your people will get a chance to live. The universe is big, you can go wherever you want. It seems that I have no choice. He waved his hand to make a bet, so that the deal with Odin could be completed. Anson didn't think about what would happen if he changed the original direction, but if some of the directions would benefit his own, why not? Turning to look at Haidaml. Helping you to be king, are you interested? Haidaml's eyes lit up. This is the deal you made with Odin? Of course, it's not. Then I'm interested. In fact, with your current strength, once you reach Asgard, you can also fight the God Domain. But I'm afraid it will be a tattered God Domain, and it will be useful to me. 4.5 My king, what do I need to do? Become a king. You can do it. Stark looked at Suruya and the others. The people of Wakanda don't know much, but Stark knows Thor's strength can be called the peak of Avengers' strength, and Loki has stirred up storms on Earth many times. Each one is not simple. Imagine if the Asgardians were like this, then Anson's strength would skyrocket again once the plan was completed. But if the other way around fails, the Earth is in danger. He couldn't help but hurriedly said, Anson, do you think about it again? From the perspective of Thor's strength, Asgard must be a high-level civilization. Anson said lightly, Mr. Stark, you are very smart, but you have never really understood the world. If you can, when you go back, you can start thinking about strengthening your strength. A Big War. Chapter 182 The crowd dispersed. Anson looked through the relevant wizarding books he got from the Dark Elves, which were very different from the knowledge in the wizarding world, but generally similar. However, like Marvel's other mysterious side forces, it also needs to borrow the power of others. A slight pity. But that doesn't mean they can't use such spells. If I hadn't promised you before, Would you have tried to do something to me? Hayla said suddenly. Anson pretended not to know. Of course not, we are a close partnership, Your Excellency. Hayla, sneered. If she believed this sentence, she would really be hell, if she dared to say a word. The 2 infinity stones hanging on Anson's chest were not decorations. Even Anson had lifted the branches of the world tree that wrapped them above, revealing the dangling infinity stones. That kind of energy fluctuation can be seen by a fool. What a dangerous and seductive little guy. Let's be honest, what do you want Asgard to do? You don't have many infinity stones in your hands right now, right? Anson looked up. There is an indescribable meaning in the smile. 18 No one is an opponent? Then she can really look at herself. There are many people in the entire universe who have collected infinity stones, but now, either dissipated in time, long dead, or abandoned the infinity stones. Why? This also goes back to the 3 special magical items in the wizarding world, the 3 Hallows of Death. Anyone who has owned and used the 3 Hallows of Death basically has no good end. What about the infinity stones? If you think about it, it seems that this is also the case. So, Anson is very good at making the infinity stones. Although the treasure is good, you can't be greedy for a cup. Cupidity. The existence of Asgard is necessary. Since we are a cooperative relationship, then it is definitely necessary to skyrocket your interests. No, you don't want to be a king. Give a look that I fulfill you. Hayla laughed. What if I attack somewhere else in the future? Feel free, as long as it doesn't hinder my plans. Otherwise, you know. Tut. Licking his lower lip, such an Anson was even more tempting. With the movement of his fingers, the dragon-shaped patronus flew out, and soon Spencer came in. Young master. Well, how is the Dark Elf's technological creation receiving? At present, the researchers in the family are gradually being accepted, and it will take a while to adapt it to suitable for us. But I recommend involving the Wakanda people. Brows frowned. Yes, nodded and walked out. The other side. In the laboratory, Stark was very happy to look at a vibranium armor made of nanotechnology, and now he should be able to stop the wizard a little. Skuru, I advise you not to be too happy. According to my understanding of them, vibranium may not be able to completely stop them. The most important thing is that people are not alone. No matter how strong the Avengers are, it is always just a few people, and can it withstand a few life spells? Stark was unimpressed. Don't worry, in fact, we are not necessarily Anson's enemies. Just like you, we may not be as good as Earth when we get here. Without the constraints of the Earth, there can be wizards behind to help. Wakanda is even a great opportunity if handled properly. The only thing to be aware of is the threat from the universe. But, who will come where the planet bird does not? Do you know what he said about Asgard? Stark paused. He wants to stage a coup d'etat in a higher civilization, and the woman who followed Anson should be an important figure in Asgard. Are you interested? T'Challa shook his head directly. Wakanda is a country that advocates peace, and we don't have to choose now. When a large number of wizards quietly controlled Wakanda, he learned that technology does not necessarily dominate everything. Return to Earth. The Avengers were still waiting here, and they were visibly relieved to see Stark Fury following Anson. Are you all right? Team America asked rarely. Stark nodded. Okay, you can leave. As for the agents you brought with you, Mr. Quirrell, please go and clear their memories here. Of course. Quirrell walked out with his wand. Hawkeye bowed, and Fury made a cold face. Quirrell leaned over to Hawkeye's bow and arrow. Yumal has a courage that I can't understand. Closing parenthesis, you can try. Team America grabbed their shields and shouted, don't get excited, don't get excited. Anson, why are you clearing their memories? I don't think we're going to expose it here. Anson, if you have to have a reason, it's that I'm willing. Mr. Quirrell, what are you waiting for? Except for your weapons. A ray of light flew out of the wand and hit Hawkeye, and in addition to flying out backwards from his body, the bow and arrow had even flown to the ground. I don't know what it is. As soon as the rest of the people wanted to move, a red energy mass had already appeared in Wanda's hand. Stark, don't get excited, it'll be fine. Fury winked. It wasn't until Quirrell returned to nod his head again that Fury took a deep look at Anson before leaving with the man. This time, in addition to discovering that something was wrong with Anson, it was equivalent to giving him a free job on the cunt-type fighter. Fury looked at Stark. What did you find at the end of 763? Stark smiled wryly. You won't want to know. I can't say. Besides, get ready to boost our power. HMPH. Captain America snorted coldly. No one can exist above the law, and his existence is a trampling on order. Stark looked like he had found an idiot. God, have you ever understood the world? Trampling on order? People themselves are the builders of order. Please figure things out first. That can't be used so arbitrarily, and besides, it's not legal. Don't treat everything with the opinion of your soldier. You old antique is no longer suitable for today's era. What do you want to do? Go fight him? Team America was silent. Lost confidence. Fury, who was sitting on the side, was thinking about more things. For example, he discovered that there was still a force in S.H.I.E.L.D. And he had a shallow chat with Spencer. As it turned out, Spencer knew something. Having thought about countless outcomes, he finally had to determine something. A week later, a certain airspace outside Earth. Several spacecraft with optical stealth slowly flew out of the Earth and stopped in space. and Skuru in the spacecraft was reporting data. There are unknown energy fluctuations, and the scan found that there are unknown technological creations, which should be the spaceship we are looking for. Chapter 183. This is the Skuru spaceship. Anson already knew that the headquarters of the Skuru people was in extraterrestrial space, which should have been captured from the Kree. Now it seems that they have never moved. To be sure, the Skuru people are not as good as they seem, at least not as well as in the original play. With a spacecraft, they can completely re-find a living planet to continue the Skuru civilization. But why didn't they go Earth, a planet that has not been born for a long time? The civilizational forces are even unable to resist the Skurlus. Such a temptation, they must not be able to resist. Only Fury, who likes to dance on the tip of a knife, would want to use their power. Blessings and misfortunes come at your own devices. Will they be able to control the ship? Skuru frowned and shook his head. I don't know at present. We just know that there is a technological creation in the airspace ahead, and I'm not sure what the situation is inside. Well, unless they hit it with a spaceship, or it will go over by some other means. In case you scare them away directly, it will be a bit tricky for Anson, a group of races that will turn into any creature once they want to hide. Even their dogs jumped off the wall and hid on the earth, or summoning the remaining clans in the universe to enter the earth in large numbers. It is simply a natural disaster for the earth. What if you attack strongly? I mean, just break a gap. Skuru still shook his head. It is not ruled out whether the other party has energy protection technology. After all, even Wakanda has this kind of technology, and the other party, as an interstellar civilization, has no reason not to understand. Difficult. Anson turned to look at Haidaml. Haidaml shrugged. Asgard's style has always been direct fighting. Asked is also a vain question. Then hit directly, turn on the main gun of the spaceship, and drive the power to the maximum. Hall. Young master. Once there is a gap, you need to enter it as soon as possible, and then come and take us in. Is there a problem? Of course. Skuru instructed the operator to charge the main gun. A 1-minute countdown. When the energy of the main gun was charged to the maximum, the space on the opposite side began to fluctuate with the naked eye. However, as well as too late. The thick energy beam directly hit it in the air like a divine thunder falling from the sky. Boom. Violent fires and explosions were instantaneous. A huge spaceship was exposed to everyone's eyes in an instant, and Skuru immediately gave the order. All remaining units resist the direction of the earth. Hall had disappeared, and in the next second, he appeared next to Anson, pulling everyone to move over. When they appeared, the Skuru people in the opposite spaceship didn't even react to what was going on, and watched in confusion as a group of humans appeared. Anson, the blade without a shadow. Yikes. After the dull sound of flesh clashing appeared, Anson waved his hand. One wizard after another disappeared, and the phantom transfiguration was used at its peak, and these 500 elite wizards were hunted down by Skuru and vampires. For many years in the Marvel world, fighting has become their instinct. Quirrell was curious. Young master, they don't seem to have the power of the mysterious side, except for the power that can transform into others. It should not be difficult to deal with. But it is precisely because of this that the Skuru people's shape-shifting ability seems to have been developed to the extreme. Suruya and Stark have not been able to develop a technological creation that can identify the Skuru people, which shows the perversion of the Skuru people's ability. Fortunately, there is no Mr. Fantastic Reed in the Marvel Universe, otherwise it should be possible to research the instrument that Anson wants. If Stark's brain was cursed by knowledge, then Mr. Fantastic's brain should be forcibly fed by knowledge. The ship vibrated slightly. Haidaml laughed. It seems that they want to run. You want to shoot? I'd love it. Raising his hand to summon 2 swords of the night sky, they flew out, and a large hole suddenly appeared with sparks. At the end, the ship's engine was paralyzed. There were clearly 2 swords sticking in the top. Anson squinted. Haidaml's strength was somewhat outrageous. Surprised? Anson nodded. Your divine power seems to have fully recovered. Of course, my divine power has recovered since Odin's soul returned to Valhalla, but it has not yet reached its peak. But once I reach the land of Asgard, hey, it's worth looking forward to. Anson seems to have discovered that he himself is playing with fire. However, for now, Haidaml still needs to use him, and there should be nothing wrong. As soon as he turned a corner and opened a door, Quirrell raised his hand and hit the death curse. A Skuru fell to the ground. In the control room, Anson looked at the group of Skuru people who were being taken aside, mostly men, few women, and most importantly, there were no old and young people here. Have the Skulans found a new planet for life, or are they hiding on Earth? Who is Daros? No one spoke. Side head. Princess Skuru. Since they are here, they should have a way to contact the Earth and contact their people, and you can find out. Yes. Directly took out the bracelet on the wrist and put it on the console to operate, and the dense code flashed and directly invaded the spaceship's system. Not often. Closing parenthesis found it. Hiss. The above information about the Skuru people that can be found in the records alone indicates that there are a large number of Skuru hidden on Earth. It is a slight pity that there does not seem to be their specific metamorphosis identity information here. Instead, they have the coordinates of their new planet. Anson laughed. No, sir, you can't do this. We are protected, and we are not harming the Earth. We just need an environment to live in. Really? The Skuru immediately nodded. Anson, I don't believe it. If it's true, then why did you transform into the upper level of the earth? Don't think I don't know your reputation in there, Zhao Wanghao, universe. Princess Skuru. How far is this coordinate they found from the earth? Approximately 10 light years, which should not be far. I found a kind of space jump point in both their system and the Dark Elf's system. Fox said suspiciously. It should be some kind of naturally formed space wormholes. Yes, that's it. Can you master it? It takes time to parse. Well, do your best to analyze. As for the other members of the Skuru people, I will find a way to solve it, and here I will deal with it. Hundreds of wizards immediately raised their wands. Anson asked, I heard that there is a group of hyenas called Marauders in the universe. Haidaml, you want to use them against the Skurlus? With the appetite of those scumbags you should have to pay a lot. The question is, do you have a universal point in the universe? There will be, Mr. Quirrell. Find out if the Skuru have one. Use enemy money to buy murderous enemies? It's really bad. Chapter 184. In the end, they really found some of the universal points of the universe used by the Skuru people, and the amount was not small, more than 1 billion. That's a lot of money. In the original play, the Guardians of the Galaxy sold an Infinity Stone, and the collector only opened 5 billion, which shows how huge the wealth of the Skuru people is. Don't look at people who are now interstellar wandering remnants, but they can't stand the ones wide. The collapse of the Skuru Empire does not mean that all their wealth will disappear. Half a month later, riding on a modified flying machine, Anson set off again with Haidaml and a group of wizards, this time to the universe. Skuru controlled the spaceship, approaching the solar system's nearest jump point, entering the coordinates. We need to jump 13 times. Countdown 5, 4.3, 2, 1. Turn on jumping. Multiply. In an instant, a visible grid-like thing appeared in the space in front of the spacecraft, and the spacecraft disappeared after entering one of the grids. Under the perspective of everyone in the spaceship, it appeared in a colorful passage. It's a bit like inside the Rainbow Bridge in Asgard. However, this should be a fundamental difference. The shuttle brought by the Rainbow Bridge is more like a space technology infused by energy, and now they are more like 477 moving in a fixed passage. Half an hour later, the wizards didn't feel much, but Skuru was a little uncomfortable. After all, she had only taken the heart-shaped grass. But Anson looked at her more like he was excited. Click on the operation interface. Shocked, the Me-Star chart found that we should be at least more than the solar system at present. 20 light-year star domain. God, this technology is too powerful. Haidaml snorted. This is just a common technology in the universe. It is not practical to rely on the power of the spaceship alone to make a long voyage. You have never seen the Rainbow Bridge. Refer to where to fight. That's really a pervert. Rainbow Bridge? Skuru glanced at Anson. Have you got to the place? Yes, this is what the goddess Haidaml called a gathering place for marauders, and a large number of spaceships have been detected cruising outside the planet. Huh? What's wrong? Unknown communication was detected in the spacecraft system, and they sent data to ask us to dock at their spaceport. It's more than that. The data also includes a list of rules for the planet, such as that large-scale force cannot be used here. Biff. Not losing is the territory of the Marauders. But how many will comply? Just follow them. When they descend to the planet in the Marauders' spaceship, they see people who are different from humans, and even they see different types of intelligent creatures. They have several heads, stones become people, and so on. It's kind of an eye-opener. No one in the crowd was surprised except for Skuru, a scientific researcher. There are even weirder creatures in the wizarding world, not to mention Haidaml, and people don't know how many people have killed. Distinguished guest, the person you are looking for is inside. I wish you a happy holiday. He waved his hand, paid the man a generic point, and left with a smile. Not far away, Anson saw some familiar figures in his memory, such as Star Eagle Starker. The origin of this person is not simple, involving the Here Empire, one of the 3 major empires. Carry an unknown beer and watch the crowd approach. Star Eagle paused. You seem to have come to find me? Of course, Your Excellency Starker. I don't know if you are interested in accepting an employment. Starker smiled and shook his head, drinking his beer. Haidaml flicked out 2 swords of the night sky. The marauders around them immediately raised their weapons and aimed them at Anson's group. Starker pointed around. Asgardians, this is not your divine domain. I advise you to be safe. If it is a vacation, we welcome it. Otherwise, why? Some time ago, these people went to plague many places in the 9 realms, and when Thor appeared on Earth, they all went to suppress the rebellion. The marauders did not have much affection for the Asgardians. Haidaml chuckled. You think these weapons can kill me? Who knows? Try it. Anson, well, we are just here to discuss business. It seems that you don't welcome us very much. Starker still looks like that. Under the real moment, Starker is not the same as ordinary extraordinary powers, and there seems to be something inside his body that is similar to Asgardian's divine power. Legend has it that the source of Starker's power is the Eagle God from the Shire Empire. Let's talk about it. I can't look at ordinary business. Of course, Your Excellency, as one of the leaders of the Marauders, does not know that the Marauders are interested in the Skurlus. Starker and down. Skuru? That group of interstellar wandering remnants? They seem to have disappeared. Anson shrugged. At least in the information I know, there is not. It seems that they have appeared in your civilization. This is a shameful group of thieves, but it is not easy to hire us. Anson waved his hand and motioned for him to make an offer. Starker held out a finger. 100 million universal points. Deal. Starker. The asking price is low. 100 million. We have found the life planet of the Skuru people. The number is unknown, but it should not be your opponent. The demand is total annihilation. Anson smiled. Is there a problem? Of course. Row through the universal point, tell the coordinates and disappear again in the spaceship. Spaceship laid out? Quirrell nodded. Yes, young master. The portal has been arranged, but the distance of nearly 20 light years does not know if it can be teleported, and how long it will take. Just try it. Hayla, aren't you afraid that they will collect money and don't do anything? Why are you afraid? Anyway, these money are just snatched. I don't feel distressed. Quirrell, are you distressed? I don't feel distressed either, young master. Ha ha ha. On the planet, the marauders gathered around. Starker, this is not your style. The Asgardians are not so scary, are they? I heard that Odin's old guy is dead. Stark shook his head. That Asgardian is naturally not terrible, but those in black robes I feel very strange. One of them, a red-skinned bug-like guy, manipulated orange energy to form words in the air. Wizard. Starker nodded. Not bad, wizard. Moreover, he had more reasons why he had to accept this employment without saying. The two things that were hanging from the young man's chest, he knew. With the power of that thing, even if all the marauders go up together, they may not be his opponents today. Anyway, it is to deal with the public enemy of the universe such as the Skuru people, and he is very comfortable with this 100 million. Gather people, we have a plan. Oh, chapter 185. That's fast. Stealth landed. Surui couldn't help but sigh. At a distance of 20 light years, I don't know how long it will take to travel so far at the fastest space speed on Earth. And jumping through the so-called wormhole takes only half an hour. If according to the data obtained from the spacecraft, as long as there are such wormholes in the entire universe, it is equivalent to the distance between the universes being infinitely closer. No wonder Anson was in such a hurry. This means that the planet is not safe. Princess Surui, about those scientific and technological creations we have obtained, I hope you can lead the scientific researchers to speed up the analysis. You know. Surui nodded solemnly. Don't worry, even for the sake of Wakanda, I will. But if I want to build our own spaceship, I hope to get more vibranium usage credits. Of course. Nodded back to Swaitvelm. There. All the Dark Elves have been taken into custody and are waiting to be used in the future attack on Asgard. Will also become one of Anson's backhand. On Earth, somewhere hidden, Taros, the leader of the Skuru people on this side of the Earth, had a calm face. Haven't you contacted your hometown yet? No, half a month ago, all communications suddenly disappeared. We sent spacecraft to see. The spaceship of my hometown is not on it, I suspect. Talos sighed. How did things get to this point? The time to replace the Earth has not yet come. And now there is a group of madmen chasing them everywhere, and even his identity as a high-ranking person who replaced Meow has been lost. It was a huge loss. Is there any news from S.H.I.E.L.D.? There's a weird piece of news, you know. We have a guy who works in S.H.I.E.L.D.'s counseling department, and he suspects that some of the agents' memories have been purged. Oh? Taro's eyes lit up. The man continued, and they have been to England, that place. It's the territory of Wizard Anson. Yes. So I suspect there might be some connection between that. Talos suddenly said, do you remember the so-called big explosion of the people in Britain half a month ago? Others said a giant spacecraft had appeared. Yes. But we have checked, and there are not many things on the internet. I suspect it was erased, and the forces behind being able to do this so quickly and cleanly are definitely not simple. Moreover, it is all half a month. This time is too coincidental. Could it really be that the wizard Anson did it? After all, the people who hunt us down are also wizards. If so, then their hatred with Anson is great. The problem is that Talos can't figure out why this person is targeting them. For now, although they have replaced some Earthlings, they will definitely not be discovered on a large scale, and some of them are instructed by Fury. Let our people, no, let the forces under our control pay more attention to Britain, and also, pay more attention from S.H.I.E.L.D., and do not operate in the near future. Take a break from the limelight. Chief, what do you want to tell Fury about the matter in S.H.I.E.L.D.? The Hydra thing? Yes, if we don't say it, Fury's power will definitely be greatly reduced, or even weakened, which is not good for us. No, Talos suddenly smiled. Fury is a man I know very well. Only when he is hurt and crippled, he will remember our role to him. Director Fury, Anson sent a message. You take a look. Natasha sent in a letter. There is also a seal covered with the symbol of the Pendra family, and I can't help but complain that the style is really old-fashioned. How did you send it? Owl. Fury raised an eyebrow, a look of are you serious? And Natasha shrugged. Tearing it open, his brows furrowed deeper and deeper. Take a look. Natasha did the same. How could he want to do something to a vampire? These people are not a good thing, and they are deliberately kept on top. Fury sneered disdainfully. Oh, it's just a group of politicians who are afraid of death. and they want to live forever through vampires. Shit is not. Then, you are in charge of this matter. There should be no danger with Anson's people and your skills, and you can just gather information about wizards nearby. If above, they need some pressure, and the world is not as simple as they seem. Button, somewhere. Closing parenthesis. A few agents guarded outside, and Natasha walked out with a blushing face after following a few wizards inside. Even if she had been in the battlefield for a long time, she couldn't help but vomit. Quirrell tilted his head and the gentleman asked, "Madame, are you all right?" It's okay." "Well, how about we go to the next place?" "Tonight's task is a bit heavy." This was supposed to be the task of the vampire of Victu who was taken by Anson to the wizarding world, but the wizarding world needed the power of vampires to deal with money affairs. Now they have to come. And in another building. Hell, most of our strongholds have disappeared, and the only news we have now is that a group of wizards are chasing us. Deacon shook his head. Panicked about what? How long will it take for the blood ancestor to wake up? The female vampire paused. It will take about half an hour, and we have prepared enough blood food. Enough for the blood ancestor to recover. It's just the chief, so that the blood ancestor will deal with the wizard as we envision. I don't know, but even if he doesn't want to deal with the wizard, he won't let him go. Just right. This time is enough for me to become a blood god. The thing is ready, right? Ready. All the elders have been captured, ready to open the ritual for you to become a blood god. Deacon walked over to the female vampire and pulled her neck with one hand. Very good. When I become a blood god, you can all get my reward. More powerful power, longer life, and no need to fear the sun. The female vampire couldn't help but tremble. Sunlight? Which vampire is not envious for a long time? Outside the building. Hayla, the things that guy uses to become a blood god seem to have something to do with the region. You know? This time, Anson was surprised. I sensed some, but I don't know which one in the region it belongs to. And you watched his strength skyrocket like this? Why not? It's just a vampire anyway. The wand pointed in the air, and an orange-red light shot up into the sky and exploded. The speed of clearing vampire territory in various parts of the city has accelerated. And in the opposite building, a corpse, which had long been shriveled, was restored after sucking a large amount of blood. Grand Duke Dracula, your people need you. Chapter 186. Dracula twisted his head, burping bones on his neck. Open your eyes. The female vampire in front of her trembled, and the coercion was obvious, as if she was standing humbly in front of Dracula. It's an instinct. Just like Meow and Mouse, Dracula restrained them to some extent. Most of the vampires of Mika are derived from Dracula, while the vampire bloodlines on Europa's side are derived from the stressed mutant bloodline. Although there are some similarities, the larger part is still different. For example, now, the female vampire has received instructions from Deacon to let the newly revived Dracula face the wizard. Arm outstretched. The female vampire was directly pulled into Dracula's hands by a force, and he bit it with a tilt of his head that had just returned to his human form. Gulling, swallowing, spicy chicken, just like that. The 940 thing also dares to say that it is my descendant? Bah. I even want to calculate myself. There was a dangerous hint in his eyes. The wizard he hadn't seen for a long time. Or is this someone from Asgard? Stand by the window. Dracula frowned. Sure enough, it's an Asgardian. One of the two standing upstairs opposite had obvious Asgardian divine power fluctuations. Moreover, it should be royalty. It's difficult, huh? He saw us. Anson was a little surprised. Hayla, don't be surprised. Although it is a recent recovery, but the villain is also an old owner of extraordinary power. What are you going to do? Let's see. As soon as the words fell, Dracula in the distance turned into a group of bats and smashed the glass and came to the building where Anson was and stopped in the distance. Why? The Asgardians want to meddle in Midget's affairs. Hayla raised her eyebrows. Then you are mistaken. It is not me who wants to deal with you. Dracula turned his head to look at Anson, who was quiet and ordinary to the side. Wizard? I've met Grand Duke Dracula. I'm sorry to meet you in this way. You know, your ethnicity is a bit too much, so I plan to let them live in another place. Dracula sneered. Change places? Where do you want to change us? How's heaven? Hayla clapped her hands. Snap. What a great place to go. But no, to let a bunch of vampires live in heaven is to send them to die. Cut. Dracula came over and looked at Anson seriously. He couldn't see through. You guys, don't mix me in. I was woken up by this group of guys when I slept well, and I was still angry. Oh? Grand Duke Dracula doesn't want to save your ethnicity. After all, if you don't make a move, they may not have another choice. If you know they still want to use me against you, you know why I'm like this, and don't compare me to these sewer creatures. Say that the whole individual turns into a bat and flies away. Anson's raised one made no move. Don't leave him, it's not necessary. It was also that he thought wrong. The difference in life levels itself cannot compare vampires and Dracula. The gap is too big. That said, he seemed to know what the vampires were up to. Anson, Wanda hit the air, retracting her craft. It's all laid out, and mole banishment charms are arranged around this block. Hard work. What kind of blood god is that? Wanda asked curiously. It should still be spawning. Yes, spawning. Deacon's plan was simple, just to use the power of someone in hell to forcibly fuse the power of all the vampire elders. And in one fell swoop, His strength skyrocketed. It may work, but Deacon would never have thought of the greed of the demons of hell. Strength, it's not that easy to borrow. Slowly, the energy fluctuations coming from the vampire building became stronger and stronger, and the wizards returned more and more. This means that the city's vampires have been eliminated to a certain extent, or elite. Quirrell appeared with a tired Natasha. Young master, they're all back. Well, let's get started then. Pay more attention. Nodding, Quirrell entered the vampire building with another 500 wizards. Novels, just go to Felu closing parenthesis bright as day. A light emitted from the wand, like the sunlight in the daytime, and the vampires who were hiding on the roof wanted to sneak up on a wave, but they didn't expect to be solved by a spell. Ambush wizard? I don't know what to think. Natasha, why, you guys are so easy. She tried. Vampires have super speed and powerful self-healing ability, and ordinary weapons are ineffective against them. If Fury hadn't taken care of some information about her before coming and brought some ultraviolet concentrated bullets, she would be even more embarrassed today. Can't stand people, not afraid of death. Number. Spread out. Quirrell, vampires are afraid of the sun, and we just give them the opportunity to soak up the sun. Accompanied by conversation. One after another, the vampires were instantly turned into flying ash after being illuminated by the light from the tip of the wand, and there was no enemy with a single blow. Natasha shrugged. Envy is more jealousy. I can't help but pity these vampires, but if those politicians become vampires and are dealt with, Fury will be in trouble, right? Up to the top floor. Quirrell narrowed his eyes. This guy, named Deacon, doesn't seem to be afraid of them. You are sat on a stone chair, as if deliberately waiting for their arrival. Strange. Natasha raised her hand and fired 2 bullets over. Jingling. The bullet falls to the ground with a crisp sound. What a strong defense. Quirrell's reaction was that this shouldn't be a vampire's defense. Could it be that this is what the young master said, the blood god? Something interesting. Mortals, they just can't learn. Bright as day. Let's do it together. Bright as day. Bright as day. Avada nibbles on a big melon. In the distance, Deacon's whole person instantly appeared on the side, avoiding the wizard's death spell. But the bright sunlight simulated by the day did not have any effect on him, and the speed was at least 2.2 times faster than that of a normal vampire. Brow furrowed. Without waiting for the wizards to react, Deacon had already appeared next to the wizards. A punch hit the head. Boom. The wizard was motionless. A thin light curtain appeared outside the body. This is an iron armor spell set on a magic robe that automatically resists attacks. Deacon's face sank. How is it possible? Quirrell raised his wand again. Avada nibbles on the melon. Trap him. Opposite the building, Anson turned his head to look to the side. Mr. Mephisto, long time no see. Out of the darkness came an old man with a skull at the top, still with the same gentleman's face, except for his dark eyes. Is the power that Deacon borrowed his? Ah, Master Anson, long time no see. Chapter 187. Do you need me to call the Ancient One Mage? Anson looks hospitable and nice to you. Mephisto's face collapsed, and he didn't know what he was thinking at this time. Most of them were the kind of scolding. Maybe the mother content is not low. There is no master law, Anson. Oh, it seems that the situation on the other side is very interesting. Anson, this guy won't be borrowing power from your excellency, right? I've checked the ghost knight's memory, and he seems to have been guarding the thing all this time. Mephisto's face fell again. Nima, I haven't asked you to settle accounts for this matter, and you mention it. This is a high-quality soul. If Master Anson doesn't mind, please let me bring it back. At least it's much better than dying like this, even if it's for the evil spirit knight's business. Anson raised an eyebrow. If he told Mephisto that the witch heart demon was also providing him with information about hell, he didn't know what he would think. What good do I have? Mephisto grinned. Mage Anson, greed is the most direct criterion for a demon, and you are very suitable to become a demon. Pass the prize. As for what you can get, 22 is not as good as. Although her lips were moving, Haidaml didn't hear a single point even when she was standing next to Anson. Anson's face showed a look of surprise. He's yours. Waving his hand, Mephisto disappeared. Haidaml, you better not believe the words of demons. Their words are generally inducing people into hell. Of course, Anson wouldn't tell Haidaml that Mephisto was telling him about where Odin had gone after he died. It's so exciting. With a flick of his wand, the patroness flew to inform Quirrell and the others to leave. Take Haidaml back first. On the other side, Fury Chen collected the footage transmitted from Natasha. Stark, who turned his head to the side. That armor of yours? Don't think about it. Anson knows I'm studying the armor to deal with wizards, but do you see what he does? That means wizards have more powers we don't understand? Fury blurted out. Stark nodded. Only this one explains. You look at this. I think you should give me an explanation. On the projection, it was the information he deciphered from S.H.I.E.L.D. It shows vampires entrenched in human cities to capture humans for their blood, as well as several huge human blood banks. To say that it is a blood bank is actually to capture a large number of human beings and raise them to bleed at any time. The sheer volume was so large that he was shocked when he saw it. You hacked into my database again? Fury frowned. I don't rule the world, you know. The only thing I can do is balance those of you who have extraordinary powers without destroying the lives of ordinary people on a large scale. And even so, Now he feels stretched. Sorcerer, too powerful, too mysterious, and without weaknesses. This means that Anson is like a little guy with a nuclear bomb, and no one knows when he will detonate and whose home he will put it. Stark, if you say so, you already know about the existence of vampires? Haven't you thought about changing something? At least don't let them catch so many humans to bleed. Shit. Very angry, Fury was silent. He wants to change. But how can he change? S.H.I.E.L.D. has a huge authority around the world, but there are some things that he can't do if he wants to. Like those guys who run S.H.I.E.L.D. These vampires exist at the behest of the beauty card high level. How does he move? If he dared, I was afraid that the Sanquing building would be breached in the next second. And now what makes him feel even more troubled is how to deal with the mess caused by Anson tomorrow. Damn it. He's the one who was wronged. You speed up and research the armor that can deal with wizards. You know how powerful they are, and they're not alone. Tony. Post. The door was kicked open, and Natasha lay wearily on one side of the sofa, her eyes looking at the ceiling overhead. Hey, it seems that your elite agents also have times when they can't do it. Fury wrinkled his face. Agent Natasha, there was no footage coming back in the last period. What happened? Do you believe in the existence of God? Closing parenthesis God, Sol and the like? Isn't it just powerful aliens? Natasha, no, I'm talking about the real Grim Reaper, Mephisto. Did you see him? Natasha nodded. She didn't know what to say. Anson threatened Avengers with the idea that wizards could manipulate human souls. She still didn't believe it. Now she believes. How powerful are hundreds of wizards? She couldn't make a specific description because there was no contrast goal. But hundreds of wizards failed to take down Deacon, who became the so-called blood god in the first place, which shows his strength. However, when Mephisto appeared, this Deacon was like a child, and was killed and disappeared by Mephisto's casual move. Terror. At that time she only remembered that Mephisto had said this to the wizard: "Your master has promised to give me his soul." In other words, Anson can talk to Mephisto. Positive conversations. That means Anson could be just as powerful as Mephisto. Looking at Fury, he said seriously, "I don't care what you want to do to Anson, but you'd better not mess around when you're not absolutely sure." At the thought that if she died, she could still be manipulated by a wizard, and she couldn't help but shiver. The two looked at each other. 3 curved wing building. High-rise meeting. Mr. Fu 607 Ruit. You need to explain to us why your people's activities in the country have not been recorded. Fury rolled his eyes at the one-eyed one. Record? Why didn't I see you in the past to let me file it? But it just moved your interests. Are vampires still alive now? This should be, but there is still a force that is constantly chasing and killing them. In this way, S.H.I.E.L.D. does not seem to have curbed the growth of this force. Guys, they have extraordinary powers, you know. Vampires are also extraordinary powers to some extent. And if you give me funding, I can handle this. How much? Fury cracked his mouth. 5 billion first. What? 3 days later. On Swate 5, sir, we are ready to enter Asgard at any time, but it will take several days to fly from here to Asgard. Malekith, we can't guarantee they won't find out. You don't have to worry about this. Anson smiled, and Asgard had another of his insiders. Also don't know what Loki is doing now. Haidaml stood aside and jumped. Once she stands on the continent of Asgard, all her power will be restored, and the entire 9 realms will enter her rule. Chapter 188. What happened to that portal that was laid out? Quirrell shook his head directly. The people we were there have replied to the message. The people who sent the past have been split, and there should be something else we haven't figured out. It's hard. If wizards don't have their own way to travel long distances, there may be many problems for the future. Leave it for now. Where are the Dark Elves now? Skuru. According to the speed of their spacecraft and the number of jumps they need to make, they should appear in the Asgard star domain 2 days later. 2 days? Haidaml asked curiously. How do you guarantee that they will go to Asgard according to your ideas after leaving? Also, did you make any deal with Odin? The universe is huge, but in some ways small. The Dark Elves were robbed of their home planet, and knowing that Anson had something like the Infinity Stones in his hands, Malekith would basically not resist as long as he was not a fool. Besides, wizards have the means to get them into submission. Anson needs to think about how to maximize his interests. You don't have to think about this. Anson looked at Haidaml seriously. You are about to become the king of Asgard. What do you think? Thoughts? What do you want to say? Anson waved his hand casually, and a contract that had been prepared appeared long ago. Let's make a deal. Haidaml grabbed the contract in her hand and looked at it. The regulations above were not complicated, and they just wanted to guarantee some of Anson's rights. But you don't trust me, my king. We are on one side. Anson smiled and said, on one side? Goddess Haidaml, I don't think we should use this trick of testing each other. You and I both know who each other is. He wouldn't trust Haidaml. Do you really think that people call my king wise? He took Haidaml to the wizarding world, and the same means he wanted to deal with wonder in the first place. One is deterrence. Second, once Haidaml stands on his opposite side, he can completely leave Haidaml in the wizarding world and cut off her chance to come to the Marvel world. Now it seems that the effect is not bad. And Haidaml really believes in Anson. There is no need to think about this. As a goddess of death, there is no need to say what kind of person Haidaml Who has the authority of death? In the original play, Even Saul's eyes were blinded. Anson doesn't think heavier than Thor, even though Haidaml and Thor were in competition at the time. The problem is that Anson and Haidaml are also just choosing each other now. Not much noble relationship. Drop blood. Haidaml and Anson felt a binding from their souls at the same time. Very powerful. Haidaml couldn't help but frown, looking at Anson's eyes with more meaning. The other end of Swayed Fine Wonder. Here we are, Tilda. There is more than one way to get into Asgard. Entering the passage, the three of them saw Loki, who had been waiting inside. That smelly fart look is comparable to Stark's. Mage Anson, I wonder if you have anything important to tell me about the divine domain? Loki sat in a stone chair. Your legs. That look was like examining the three of them. I heard that Thor recently went to Muspelheim. You're well informed. Anson raised his eyebrows. If there is a group of Asgard's enemies attacking the god domain now, I think you should be very interested. Oh? Who dares to attack the god domain? Loki didn't believe it. What if anyone knew Odin was dead? At this moment, Loki was a little confused, but he didn't think about it. Now it's hard to fool Thor to solve some guys in the Flame Country, and I don't know why there's been a lot of noise lately. He took Odin's former place. Because of Anson's intervention, things seem to be very different from the original show, such as Odin hanging up in advance. Of course, perhaps Odin has his own considerations in mind, but since it has changed, then Anson might as well start the layout according to his own ideas. What do you want to say, Loki? If you can resist the attackers and protect Asgard, I think the people of the Divine Domain will support you more. At least you have a chance to compete with Thor, don't you? Seeing that Loki still didn't speak, Anson said to himself, or are you capable of competing with Thor? Closing parenthesis wonder, it seems that he just knows some tricks. Loki roared, impossible, don't think I don't know your tricks. Anson, you want to provoke a fight between me and Thor? You know, in front of you is the first mage of the 9 realms, the god of teasing. Loki. Anson spread out his hand. Well, as long as the god domain is attacked by someone, Thor will definitely come back at that time, and the credit and people who saved the god domain are still the Orthodox heirs, I think. Loki was silent. What do you want? Pointing at Haidaml, she is also a person from the god domain. I think she is qualified to enter the god domain, and may provide you with some help. Haidaml raised her eyebrows. What the hell did he hit? Deal. When will the enemy arrive? 2 days later. Loki leaves. Outside the god domain, a group of spaceships slowly approached Asgard. This is a continent artificially created to float in the universe, and when you look at it from a distance, you can see huge waterfalls falling into the universe everywhere. Underneath Asgard, there is a black hole that rotates all the time. Anything that falls into it will disappear. The ingenuity of the design. Even Anson admired the wisdom and strength of the people of the god domain when he saw it. The divine domain continent is not just a continent, otherwise Haidaml would not draw power from this to strengthen herself, and this continent, to put it bluntly, is the anchor point that connects the world tree. Likas waved his hand. All units are approaching silently. Once they get close, they will give priority to solving the peripheral defense forces, and give priority to assisting me in completing the task. Chief, will that person really let us leave as agreed? Moreover, as old rivals of the divine domain, they are well aware of the horrors of the Asgardians. This is our only option. Go down and prepare. The spaceship is stealthy, approaching the continent of Asgard little by little. Even they could see colorful light spots rising from the Rainbow Bridge, near behind the Wall of Sighs. Malachus shouted, fire! Bang, bang, bang. The originally stealthy battleship instantly appeared in the eyes of the Asgardians because of fire, and the defensive weapons erected on the Wall of Sighs were all destroyed at the first time. At least in this direction. Hurry up, hurry up. Small spaceship center. Attention. Give priority to killing the god Queen Frigga. Chapter 189. The small shuttle ship of the Dark Elves is like no man's land. They never thought that Asgard's defenses would be so bad, and even if they were caught off guard, they shouldn't be so unresponsive. Arrogant to see people and explode. But when they swept over the Wall of Sighs, they found that the Asgardian army was already waiting here. The ancient flying machine, like a sailing ship, was suspended densely on the ground, and in front of them, several army phalanx were already looking at them angrily. Loki stood on a high platform in the rear, holding aloft the eternal spear. Attack! A hill! Bang bang! Bang bang! Swarms of spaceships rushed towards the area of the Dark Elves, and the colorful energy cannons seemed to rain down, and the fire from the explosion spread one flower after another on the water below. Malachus kept his face composed. How could they possibly be prepared? Chief, do you want to retreat? No, all of us have signed a contract with that guy. If we don't complete the task we will all die immediately. This is our only chance. All units opened a passage for the mothership and detected the location of the god Queen Frigga. Chief, it has been detected. She is in the rear. This location. A red dot on the projection is moving. In the distance, the three stood on the Rainbow Bridge and watched this scene. Not to mention 110, the Dark Elves still have 2 hands, and if it were not for the addition of wizard power, Wakanda might not be their opponent. For example, at the moment, as soon as the cursed warriors of the Dark Elves reached the ground, They instantly crushed a large number of Asgardian soldiers. No one was even able to hold out their attacks. This is the full power of Asgard. Not, to be precise, these people are only the new generation of Asgard, and there are not many Asgardians of the older generation here, like those who followed Haidaml in the first place. Haidaml raised her head and looked at the battlefield. I didn't expect that the current Asgardian people have reached this point. In my time, any Asgardian is a good hand. It's battle-tested. Now what about these? Like mortals, they are so stupid that they can only use their physical strength to fight the dark elves, especially those sailing old antiques in the sky. How long has Odin not gone out? Even the dark elf's battleship has the first-class level of the universe, and the spaceship on Asgard's side is still the same as when she was suppressed. Disappointed. Loki is still careless. Wanda sneered, that guy is just able to juggle. What does he think this is? That's not how war works. Anson declined to comment. In the distance, when a sound of breaking the air came, Thor saw the god Queen Frigga, who was stabbed to death by a spear of Malekith's, and instantly threw out his own mina. Anson, it's time for us to strike. The illusion charm is used and he goes all the way straight to Odin's treasure room. Lift the cosmic cube casually and put it in your hand. Haidaml raised an eyebrow. So, that's what you're aiming for? It's just a deal. As for the rest, it didn't have much attraction to Anson, but there was some Carmitage secret mage equipment placed here, which should have been stolen before. Haidaml held the eternal flame in one hand, stomped under his feet to reveal a space, and the whole person fell down. Wanda's face changed slightly. A strand. Very evil force. It's normal for people to be goddesses with the authority of death. Click. With a force, the cosmic cube shattered to reveal an ice blue space gem inside, and the world tree was also hung on the chest after being entangled. Infinity stones. 3 have been obtained. Click 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 click. Outside, the battle is raging. But at this moment, everyone turned their heads to look into the depths of the god domain at the same time, and one by one people with green flame energy in their grey eyes appeared. Handheld weapons. It is the standard weapon of Asgard. The old man could recognize at a glance that it was a weapon from a long time ago. Moreover, how is it she who is at the head? Closing parenthesis. Isn't it said to be suppressed by the king of the gods? Thor and Malekith distanced themselves, and a group of god domain warriors stood behind them. Kadai held up mina and asked, who the hell are you? Why did it appear from within the god domain? Haidaml rode a huge wolf and went down high. Malekith, the dark elves will perish today, and in order to wash away the sins you have committed today, I will grant you precious death. The sword of the night sky flicked, approaching Malekith's face. He couldn't figure out how he could figure out after longer blocked it. The Anson guy never wanted to let them go. Instead, they were sold to Haidaml, so that Haidaml could gain enough prestige in this big drama of foreign enemies attacking God Online. Thus, ascend to the throne of the divine domain. Roar. Kill. Malekith roared. Anson, you. A cloud of red energy smashed into him. Wanda, be careful what you say. Thor, what should we do? The Valkyrie Sif stood beside Thor and asked. Now the situation is even worse. Originally they were just fighting against the Dark Elves, although they were caught off guard, but this was on the God domain. Sooner or later, it will be able to drive out the ranks of the Dark Elves. Later, because the God Queen was killed, everyone almost killed Red Eyes. But at this time, a group of, obviously a guy from the Divine Domain. Thor gritted his teeth. We're on to. However, Anson's wand was already aimed at them. All petrochemical. In an instant, several universal petrification spells were superimposed on the small group of Thor, and the surrounding warriors watched Thor, the son of Odin, not moving. But his fellow soldiers are still fighting, and they can only bite the bullet. In the rear, all those who were controlled were pulled and flew back and stood on the high platform. Loki clutched the eternal spear, not daring to speak. On the side, Haidaml had a circle of sharp weapons made of vibranium round his neck, which would not exceed a centimeter. Haidaml is not fit to be king. Anson smiled. What if I say this is what Odin means? Haidaml snorted. Loki sneered. It seems that there are many things we don't know. Haidaml, can you say something? Haidaml, the first heir of Asgard, is yours sister. Impossible. If she really is our sister, there is no reason we will not know. I have never listened to my father for more than 1,000 years, he said. Sigh. Haidaml, once she appears, you don't need to think about it, as long as she stands on the land of the divine domain, to some extent. Her power is unlimited. Moreover, there is now the merit of saving the god domain from fire and water. The other, Haidaml's once sealed subordinates, are a bunch of madmen, a group of an army far beyond the current power of the Asgardians. The foregone conclusion. Not to mention that Haidaml is accompanied by a guy who holds 3 infinity stones. Chapter 190. Even Saul, who was petrified in place, couldn't help but be stunned when he heard Haidaml say this. A sister who came out of nowhere. Now obviously hooked up with the guy Anson again, who can't see Haidaml and Anson's plans now. Once Asgard falls into her hands, what will become of the 9 realms? Like click. Thor twisted slightly. Anson's wand was raised again, and Haidaml quickly shouted, Master Anson, don't worry. Letting Thor break free from the petrified bondage, he thought of something with mina in his hand, staring at Loki fiercely. Does the presence of these dark elves here have something to do with you? Loki's eyes dodged. Thor said sadly, Do you know because of your mother? Loki was silent. Looking up at Anson. Why? Thor turned his head, and there was already an uncontrollable anger in his eyes. Why? What grudge does Asgard have with you? Anson laughed. Asgard, its existence itself is a kind of grudge. You have ruled the 9 realms for thousands of years, and now is the time to change people. You? Thor looked disdainful. Although you have great strength and manpower, the complexity of the 9 realms is far beyond your imagination. If nothing else, the 9 realms are not in one place, and it can be said that any force outside Asgard in the 9 realms cannot control the 9 realms. No one can appear anywhere in the 9 realms at will like Asgard. Rule? No way. Haidaml, that's right. Even if Haidaml becomes the king of Asgard, she will not be able to obey your command. Master Anson, what will you do then? You don't have to worry about me or provoke my relationship with Haidaml at this point. Rule the 9 realms? I'm afraid he doesn't have that leisure. In fact, as long as Haidaml is in Asgard, his influence on the 9 realms can be guaranteed, and Haidaml is unlikely to come with him after signing that contract. As for later, whatever. Feel a coldness. Scold. When Anson turned around, he just saw a golden light flying towards him, blocked by the iron armor spell. The energy shield laid out by the iron armor spell dissipated. The eternal spear moved on, clanging on Anson's magic robe. His face was slightly stunned. In the distance, Loki spread his hands and laughed. I'll try to see if I can kill you with one hit. It doesn't seem to work. Then everyone. See you later. The figure dissipated. Wanda pointed to the distance of the battlefield. There. Loki has grabbed an Asgardian spaceship and jumped down the wormhole under the Asgard continent, disappearing into the cosmic turbulence. Scold. Looking at Thor. Don't you want to make a move on me? After all, your mother's death should also be considered to have something to do with me. Thor struggled. Haidaml frequently gave him a look and shook his head, and in the end he could only stand in place and grab Mjolnir. He can't shoot, let alone whether he can hit Anson. What about the people of Asgard? As long as he fails, then with Anson's style, the people of God Domain will definitely not have a good dilemma. Half an hour don't. With Haidaml personally coming down, and again on the continent of Asgard, her power is increasing every second. The fate of Malachus can be imagined. None of the dark spirits are able to fight this battle. Some of the blood of the dark elves on Haidaml's body dripped up, did not wipe it out, and slowly walked to the heights with her steps. The surrounding Asgardian people know who Haidaml is among the older generation. Haidaml shouted, Asgard, in the future will honor me as king. I Haidaml, goddess of death, the glory of the divine domain will continue. Roar, roar, the god domain people resurrected by Haidaml responded immediately, and the god domain army and the people who did not know what to do roared hesitantly. A louder cheer erupted than Haidaml's people. Thor wrinkled his brows. You're doing it here, right? Anson bowed his head slightly. It's just some small operations, magic, you know. In the end, Haidaml ascended to the throne of the divine domain with the immense prestige of clearing the dark elf carriers. And Anson got more things that he couldn't believe before, such as all the knowledge of Asgard, all of it, and something he wanted so badly. Alu metal and dwarves. Haidaml says that the dwarves will become Anson's subordinates, but whether he can let the dwarves listen to him is up to him. From the Rainbow Bridge, go directly to the dimension where the dwarves are, or the star field, near Novi. As soon as it landed, after the Rainbow Bridge dissipated, the two suddenly saw a planet wrapped in huge man-made objects, different from normal life planets. The sight of Novi is really not beautiful. Everywhere is nothing more than a pile of materials and unknown technological creations. Moreover, the planet is small. Wanda looked into the distance. Someone is coming. A dwarf taller than her grid appears. Can this be called a dwarf? So what are the Asgardians? Dwarf, king of the dwarves, Etri, has seen the warriors of Asgard. Anson smiled and shook his head. Andre Aikwi, I am not from Asgard, but I have some relationship with Asgard. Aikwi was stunned. Not someone from the divine domain. So why can it appear here with the Rainbow Bridge? Novi is not unknown in the universe, but it is by no means available to anyone, especially if their dwarven talent is still so famous. There are a lot of people who pursue dwarf artifacts. Wanda, Odin, the god king of Asgard, has died, and now Haidaml, the goddess of death, is king, and in gratitude for helping us in the gods, she gave us the dwarves. Ha 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 ha. No way. Ai Choi laughed and shook his head. Asgard signed a contract with us to shelter the dwarves forever, and we will make weapons for them. This is a contract. That's right. But what about the facts? On Asgard, however, there is the Wall of Size, which was built from the bones of all the giants of the 9 realms. Any giant that approaches the Wall of Size will have a certain degree of suppression. To put it bluntly, the dwarves did not deal with the god domain at first, but later the Asgardians succeeded, and the dwarves with technical means were also signed a so-called contract. In the original play, when the dwarves were slaughtered by Thanos, they did not see Asgardians. Is Haidaml invisible? I'm afraid not. Anson said indifferently, I'm not here to joke with you, Your Excellency Aikwi. You should know that in the face of the strong, your dwarf clan has only one choice. Wanda answered, surrender, or die. Chapter 191. The atmosphere is solemn. There were more and more dwarves gathered around, about a few hundred, no more than 500, or even less. Some are even already preparing with weapons. The energy core of Novi's forged weapon is shining brightly, the core of the planet, compressed here by the power of technology and mysterious sides. The huge man-made objects surrounding the planet wrapped around the planet like a Dyson ball and rotated the entire planet. Outside the planet, there is an empty universe. The cold universe is such a scene. Ai Choi looked at Anson, and then at his own people. You want to rule the dwarves, not domination. I think cooperation. Ai Kui sneered. It's all the same, whether it's Asgard or you. If you want to rule us, you need to prove that you have such power. Anson smiled. Wonder 2060. He pointed to the necklace hanging from his chest. Is this still proof? Ai Choi's pupils shrank. Infinity stones? And it's still 3. God and Odin fighting the landlord are not against 3. How is this possible? He blurted out. How could Asgard allow them to appear more than one in the same place? That's not something you need to think about. Now, we agree. Sure, and said quickly. It caught Anson off guard, and to be honest, the dwarves didn't play a great role in him. Looking at the wizard's equipment, apart from some special magic items, it seems that there is nothing worth the wizard's excessive investment. Even a one only needs one. It's not complicated yet. They can do it themselves. And what are the dwarves good at? Manufacture of weapons. Of course, there are also some things that Anson has to look at. As mentioned above, the Rainbow Bridge is a technology based on the World Tree, and the dwarves created the Eternal Spear and later the Storm Tomahawk for Odin. Both of these can display the same teleportation ability as the Rainbow Bridge without going through the Rainbow Bridge of God domain. Further, is this a strike technique that can manipulate the Rainbow Bridge across space? In other words, the dwarves have mastered this technique to some extent. In Odin's style of doing things, technology cannot be completely handed over to the dwarves, but as long as there is some technology, Anson himself should be able to develop something. That's enough. Anson, don't think about it. Maybe I'm weak. The corners of Ai Kui's mouth twitched. Weak? Will someone who has mastered 3 infinity stones be weak? He's not Saul. Ai Kui knelt on one knee. I, Ai Kui, the king of the dwarves, hereby swear that the dwarves will for Anson, Pendra will give loyalty and everything to Anson, Pendra. All the dwarves followed. Show me Nidoi. In addition to the accumulation of a large number of precious metals on the small planet, it is the alu metal that Anson's eyes are hungry, and only Nidoi exists in the entire marvel of Uru metal. Maybe there are still in the universe, but I haven't heard of it. Therefore, the most precious thing of the dwarves is this thing besides the weapons that can make the Rainbow Bridge. Wanda opened her small mouth. A lot. All that is piled up in the warehouse. Can you imagine the concept that even a miscellaneous soldier on Asgard has a weapon made of Uru metal? Ai Choi was quite proud. I wonder if Sir knows the relationship between the 9 realms and the World Tree? This has something to do with Uru metal? That's right. In fact, as long as Nidoi is still connected to the World Tree, the World Tree can continuously pour energy into Nidoi, resulting in alu metal, equivalent to renewable minerals. The key lies in the connection of the World Tree. Interesting. Uru metal can increase and use the mysterious side energy. Very good. And now there are a lot of Uru metal on Anson's wand, like a long stick. But another problem arises. This is tantamount to saying that Nidoi and the dwarves can't move, which is not a good thing for Anson. Does Nidoi have a weapon that can defend against enemy invasion? Ai Kui, why did the gentleman ask that? Yes, but it's just some basic weapons units. After all, we originally had Asgard protection. Not everyone can find it here. Closing parenthesis. How to do it as if someone is going to attack Nidoi, except for you. Is there a possibility then? Transfer Nidoi? Transfer. Anson nodded solemnly. Yes, although Nidoi is very mysterious in the universe, it is not unknown to anyone. You need to find a new star field to live in. It can be. The connection between the World Tree and the 9 realms is very mysterious, no matter where we go. However, if you want to push Nidoi to live in another new star field, just finding a suitable star domain is a troublesome matter, and it takes a long time to prepare. With Nidoi's technology, it is not difficult to transform Nidoi to push it on the engine to leave. He felt that Anson was making a fuss, but when I thought about it, after all, this is a new owner, and people still think about them and do not refute it. Immediately instructed Ai Choi to start preparing for these things. Half a month later, returning to Asgard with Etri and Wanda, today is the day of Hela's coronation. The whole of Asgard was noisy and lively. Thor sat silently in his bedroom, looking at what Frigga had given him in the past, and couldn't help but fall into deep thought. He didn't know what means Anson used to make the entire people of the Divine Domain begin to accept Hela. Now, even the 4 warriors around him seemed to have begun to join Hela's followers, and Loki disappeared. His identity is embarrassing in the God Domain, and he doesn't know what to do. Directly enter the hall with 2 people. Hela was watching with the Spear of Eternity. Here you are. It seems that you are enjoying the present. Hela put the Eternal Spear aside casually. I have always thought that this spear is useless, but my people have told me that a king needs to have his own weapon. Ai Choi looked at Anson 2.2. Tired of Ai Kui? When the time comes, create a king weapon for Queen Hela. Of course. Hela nodded in satisfaction. Suddenly beckoned to Anson. Come, pat on the throne. Anson, what's wrong my king? This throne has half of yours. This temptation is not necessary. is it? Haidaml smiled and looked at him condescendingly with her legs crossed. You're going back? Nodded. Haidaml paused. In the future, the universe will definitely not be as quiet as before. You must be strong quickly, otherwise, don't say that I abandoned you. You know, you can't kill me. Not necessarily. Haidaml looked at the infinity stones on Anson's chest with trepidation. That said, there seems to be a glove in the treasury. Chapter 192. Snape's eyes were extremely affirmative. I'm sure, I've been waiting for this day for 4 years. Hell, I'm pretty sure. Anson looked at him. Snape's excitement slowly subsided, and he couldn't help but tell Anson over and over again that he wanted to resurrect Lily. He can understand. Snape wasn't a good guy, but he was definitely not a bad guy. At the very least, a person worthy of admiration. Compared to Dumbledore, what Professor Snape wanted was actually very simple, nothing more than a normal life. His loyalty to love is enough to make Anson look sideways. Anson asked himself if he couldn't do that. Night. The trio appeared in Godric's Hollow. It is a cemetery. The surroundings were dark and damp, and there were tombstones everywhere, and I could vaguely hear several raven calls from the darkness, which seemed a little bleak. In front of the three were 2 tombstones. As soon as Snape appeared, he froze in place, his eyes jumping, as if he was remembering something. Anson glanced at Lily. Potter, Jaime, Potter, Professor. Do you need me to help you dig his grave to you off? Pointing to James Potter's tombstone. Snape felt that he should not stay with this little devil. Listen, is this human speech? Albeit, well, he was a little moved. Hurry up and do your thing. This is what you promised me. Okayochi, hurry. The magic wand pointed out. Power explosion. Snape grabbed his hand. What do you want to do? I'll come myself. You go away. Anson shrugged, and Wang pursed his lips and smiled. Whispered, you just wanted to explode with force. A powerful spell, isn't it? Indeed, according to my current strength, it should have blown up all the bones inside. It's really petty. I obviously saw him move just now. Wanda shook her head helplessly. Snape carefully manipulated his magic to remove the dirt from the tombstone until a coffin lid was exposed, and then jumped down to clean it up with his hands. Anson put away his playfulness. You say what would happen to Harry if we told Harry that his parents' grave had been dug up? Extreme virtue. Anson, I didn't do it again. Snape. Returning to Pendramana with the skeleton, Snape carefully pulled open the canvas cover, revealing a petite human skeleton inside, which was Lily Evans. Anson removed the Infinity Stone's necklace from his chest and handed it to Wanda. She alone could not fulfill Snape's request to resurrect Lily Evans. Snape couldn't help but ask, is it really possible? I mean, Wanda is still a student after all. I can wait. Please, Professor, you asked me to complete the deal with you, and now you are afraid again? If I were, you should think more about what to say when I saw her. Yes, what should he say? The face is visibly cramped. Licking the dog will end up with nothing. Self-care came to Wanda. How is it? It should be possible. My ability to control the modification probability has been strengthening since this time, and it is probably no problem with the bonus of the Infinity Stones. Snape shouted. Wait, you guys just do things with should, probably? His face was stunned. Wanda said calmly. Professor, have you heard of anyone who has successfully resurrected the dead? Rest assured, even if it is not successful anyway, it will not make any difference. As soon as Wanda wanted to move, Anson spoke again. Wait. Looking at Snape. Professor, what are you going to do if you succeed in resurrection? I mean, do you want to modify her memory? Don't even think about it. It's decided. Shrugging his shoulders signals Wanda to begin. Close your eyes. The Infinity Stones hanging on their chests were radiating a light that belonged to them, and along with Wanda's red energy, it wrapped Lily Evans as skeletons. The wizarding world, somewhere. Lily Evans's soul should have been as muddy as James's, but now she felt allure. Yes, that's the word. There was a force pulling at her soul. Incredible. Closing parenthesis. The last time this happened was when Harry discovered the Mirror of Eris, and it appeared briefly once. What now? It couldn't be that Harry was in some danger again, could it? Ignoring James Potter, he floated straight along with the power. Inside Pendramana, the energy of the Infinity Stones directly dissolved the protective spells placed outside the manor, and gusts of wind blew out, especially near Wanda. Snape stared closely at the center of the storm. There were the bones of the people he missed, and with such a momentum, he somewhat believed that Wanda could really resurrect her. With time, flesh and blood began to appear on Lily Evans' skeleton, and a heart and various organs appeared. Anson is watching all this with his true eyes until the body is built and a ghostly being floats in. Really? Anson's eyes widened. To be honest, when he said that he could resurrect Lily Evans, he actually lied to Snape. After all, there is nothing wrong with tricking and licking dogs. He also confiscated social experience fees. Now Wanda actually did it, even with the help of the power of the Infinity Stones. But this just shows the perversion of Wanda's ability. The look in Wanda's eyes became more and more jealous. Worthy of being a witch who could directly erase mutants. Probabilistic modification. Isn't that different from saying things? However, Wanda doesn't seem to be very easy either. The breath is languishing, and the magic is close to exhaustion. Until he collapsed to the ground with a snap and fainted. Anson crouched to the side. Well, the magic was exhausted, and if it weren't for the Infinity Stones in her estimation, she would have been sucked dry. Magical. My own conjecture is right. The soul of this world is very strange. Hall appeared. Zows, young master, take Wanda to rest and prepare some potions to replenish her magic power to drink. Wear the necklace of the Infinity Stones. On the other side, the resurrected Lily Evans had been held on the couch by Snape. Why didn't you wake up? Can't help but ask Anson. Anson stepped forward and snapped. A slap directly slapped Lily Evans' face, and a red mark instantly appeared. Snape, no, alas, Anson, this. How can you stand? Whoops. On the sofa, Lily Evans covered her face and sat up dumbfounded. Servus. Anson shrugged. My hometown has a trick. Any equipment that doesn't work is just a good shot. Look. You roll. Laughed and walked out. Snape looked nervously at Lily Evans, especially those green glowing eyes. Hello, Lily. Chapter 194. Anson hid outside and listened to the foot of the wall, and the words seemed to be silent. Just as I was about to get closer, the door opened. Snape looked at him expressionless and as if he was disgusted. Come in. Internal force. Lily Evans' faces are a little wrong, as if they have cried. Snape is so powerful. Just made you cry as soon as you were resurrected? Ah, I've met you, Mrs. Evans, and I'm very familiar with your son Harry, Anson said. Lily Evans, hello, Mr. Pendra. Snape, enough. I called you in to ask you, what should I do in the future? Anson Fox was suspicious. Looking at the eyes of the two of them, there is something wrong. No, I have already helped you resurrect your sister. Do you want me to arrange it? That's excessive. What do you mean? Snape explained in a low voice that Anson understood. It turned out that the problem still appeared with Lily Evans. Simply put, is the resurrected person still the same person? This question depends on how you look at it. Of course, it is more likely that it cannot be the same person, and a person's state of the last second and the next second is also very different. Not to mention that Lily Evans, the O20 species, was resurrected after more than 10 years of death. Although she also has the soul and even body of Lily Evans, she is actually not the same person as she used to be. What are you worried about, Professor? Snape made a calm face. I think Lily has been gone for so long, and judging by the current situation, she is not suitable to appear in her previous capacity. Anson was abrupt. Once people know that there is a way to resurrect others, even if only this information, it will bring endless trouble. It is also a kind of destruction and change of the situation. This means that wizards are no longer in awe of death, thus affecting the wizard no longer interested in living life is in awe. Death and the survival of life always exist and appear together. What do you think? Snape was just about to speak, but Lily Evans spoke first. I want to change my lifestyle, or change my identity. How are Lily and Snape? Anson looked at her deeply. This wish is not simple. Of course, Mom. What do you think, Professor? Kvarf. Yes. Lily and Snape smiled. Perhaps, this way I can grow up with Harry, which is a very happy thing for me. Thank you, Mr. Pendra. You're welcome. It's just a deal with the Professor. Then Lily, Mrs. Snape, in order to ensure that something unnecessary will happen, I think you still need to sign some contracts. A dragon skin contract floats. Lily froze. Very strange magic. It seems to be much more mysterious than the unbreakable oath. Snape, is this necessary? Professor, no one can truly resurrect the dead, you know. Even now that Voldemort is still looking for a way to escape death, what do others think will happen if they know it? There was coldness on his smiling face. Lily shook her head. It's okay. The contract is signed. Lily's eyes brightened a little, and as she expected, this kind of contract was indeed something she had never seen before. Nightfall. Snape sat with Anson in the manor office drinking tea. Are you worried about something, Professor? Lily, are you sure there's no problem? I thought she would beg me to resurrect Jam Potter after the resurrection, but she didn't. What do you think I did to resurrect her? Closing parenthesis. Anson shook his head. You don't have to think of me like this. One more Lily Evans will not affect anything to me. As for the rest, she should be normal. But you also know, after all, this may be the first deceased to be resurrected, and what problems can only be observed slowly. Snape sighed. Now, that's it. The moment he saw Lily open her eyes, it seemed that all these years of waiting and guilt had dissipated. As the saying goes, changing the way of life is not necessarily a good thing, and so is he. So what should he do to Harry in the future? Hell, these things are not as simple as boiling potions. The next day, Anson returned to the magic tower. Quirrell bowed and said, Young Master, Mr. Weasley is here. Anson looked up and put down the information paper in his hand full of what had happened in the wizarding world after he left. The Weasley was a little cramped. I've seen Mr. Pendra. Hello, Mr. Weasley. I have read the information. The Alchemy Wizard Legion has produced a lot of new magical items. You have worked hard. Weasley rubbed his hands together, and he was also a little happy to face Anson's praise and affirmation. It's all big guys working together. We're just experimenting on the idea proposed by Mr. Pendra. No need to be modest. Pour tea for Mr. Weasley. Gesture to Quirrell. After a few chats, Weasley got the reward he deserved and left to work. Only then did Quirrell say, Young Master, the Three Schools tournament, which has not been held for centuries, is determined to be held at Hogwarts this time. and I don't think it's good. Why is it not good to come? Anson has seen this part of the information. The Triwizard Tournament, also known as the Triwizard Tournament, is jointly held by the 3 schools of magic and wizardry of Hogwarts, Buxbatons, and Demarstrang. Dumbledore talked to him about it when he left last year, and Anson didn't care at the time. After all, it's just some kids playing. In the original play, it is just the power behind Voldemort, the Death Eaters, who are promoting this matter, in order to obtain Harry's blood and thus obtain a new body. But now Voldemort has been resurrected by Neville's blood for a long time, and he actually can't use Harry's blood anymore. Of course, there is definitely more to it than that. Specifically, Lady Maxime, the headmaster of Buxbatons, is a giant half-blood, with a much thicker bloodline than Hagrid, and it is said that now Buxbatons has been controlled by Death Eaters, and Demarstrang's headmaster, Karkaroff, himself a former Death Eater, but he later betrayed Voldemort in exchange for peace, and now seems to have re-entered Voldemort's arms. Quirrell said solemnly, "Young master, I suspect that this Triwizard Tournament is aimed at us." "You say this is here to test us?" "Yes, at present. The Death Eaters are basically unable to enter the mainland, and only by taking advantage of such an opportunity will he be able to know the specific situation of the mainland. It's not impossible, but here also illustrates a problem from the side. The power of the Death Eaters has grown to a certain level." Chapter 195. Are the supplies for the 20 Wizard Legions already available? Quirrell nodded. The dragon skin magic robes have been equipped, and our newly obtained technological weapons have been prepared, and the Wizard Legion can be called on at any time. "Young master, is this the right time?" Anson's fingers tapped on the tabletop. "Occasion. Actually, it can be done at any time. The only thing to consider is how to maximize the benefits. He has no shortage of manpower, no lack of resources, no lack of knowledge. In this state, if you are still thinking about sharing your future with wizards who will only rely on traditional ideas to develop the wizarding world, it's a waste. Whether the world takes the route of scientific and technological development, or takes the mysterious side wizard route development, both have a crucial factor influencing development and upper limits. Population. Only when the population base reaches a certain height will more potential burst out in the future, that's for sure. For example, what he is doing now directly turns hundreds of thousands of squibs into wizards, even if they are mass-produced, but it has a great impact on promoting the reform and development of the wizarding world. What if that number were higher? The appearance of a large number of wizards will inevitably affect the stability of the Mull world. Anson didn't expect that each of these wizards who could change the Mull world at any time would be good. In this way, the Mull world needs to change as well. This, Anson has already begun to arrange people to do a few years ago. What is the most acceptable thing on the mysterious side for Mulls? Undoubtedly, religion is the most suitable. All in all, once you do it, it will inevitably involve changes in the whole world. Our strength is enough. As for the rest, there is no need to think about it. Quirrell asked carefully, "So now, let filch arrange for all legions except the First Wizard Legion and the Alchemy Wizard Legion to enter the other wizarding realms to hide, which will begin after the year-end Triwizard Tournament." "Yes, the role of the Alchemy Wizard Legion is purely magical research, and there is no need to touch them. As for the First Wizard Legion, it is currently the most powerful wizard power in his hands, and it is of great use, and they need to be used to deal with Voldemort's elite." Anson paused and asked, "How is the dragon cultivation in the dragon field?" "The number has reached the level of the young master's command, but it is difficult to tame the dragon to serve us. You know, dragons are actually intelligent creatures in Mull terms. Not surprisingly, most fantastic beasts have a lot of intelligence. Even the language of existence and its own writing. It's just that the wizards don't understand it, and Dumbledore will at least surpass the language of nearly 10 magical animals." "What about the capture curse?" Quirrell shook his head directly. "It's not safe. Spells such as the capture curse, the oblivion charm, etc., which can modify and control memory, may have the characteristics of breaking the effect on units with magic power. The higher the magic, the more obvious this disadvantage will be. Dragons aren't as simple as magical cats." "Then use the contract, transfer some magical animal lever over and I will personally operate it. Select 10,000 dragons for the First Wizard Legion, and then create some magic items for the dragons." Quirrell nodded and got up to do it. "Dragon Knight? What is it like to think of tens of thousands of dragons wearing magic robes and carrying wizards into the air?" "Of course, this is of little use. The wizard is a mobile battery, you fly into the sky, even the speed of the dragon is not too fast, at least not as fast as the speed of the spell. In this way, the heavens are just living targets." Quirrell felt that the young master might be preparing for the future. Maybe this arrangement would be useful in the future. For example, this time he went to deal with that one called it's the Dark Elves. If there are dragons, the Dark Elves are also living targets on the ground. Burrow. Bang bang bang. An owl kept pecking at the window glass with its beak, and Molly, who was preparing food in the kitchen, barked in dissatisfaction. "George, Fred, Ron, who of you has time to open the window for that damn owl? Merlin is on it, and you can't understand anything day by day," shouted a few times. There was still no movement outside, and then he put down his work and went to open the window. A handful pulled over the letter held on the owl's mouth. Snape, Molly muttered. This is really strange enough. Mom, what's wrong? Ginny and the little ones poked their heads out at the top of the stairs and asked curiously. I'll take a look. Snape, with his wife, visit. Well, Merlin's old king next door. Go to Hogwarts to ask Deng. No. Go and call your father. Not long after, Arthur Weasley arrived. The same look at the envelope with a confused look. When did Professor Snape have a wife? Ron looked incredulous. George, even our brother doesn't have a girlfriend. Closing parenthesis. Fred, impossible. Absolutely impossible, isn't it? I feel like you're yin and yang. Ginny rolled her eyes. No need to feel it. Yes, but I really haven't heard of Professor Snape's marriage. Arthur shrugged. Leave him alone. Anyway, when the time comes, you will know. Harry in the crowd was more of a surprise. How does he sound? The name some familiar? Lily, Snape, feel in yin and yang me. Before dinner, it was already a little dark around the burrow, and under the setting sun, the burrow was printed with orange-red residual sun, and the grass not far away was a little beautiful. Of course, if you subconsciously don't look at the burrow crookedly and don't follow the beautiful architectural structure. Here it is. Mr. Pendra's cat can backflip. How is this possible? Maury and her husband Arthur looked at each other, and the man, that person, it is clearly Harry's mother, Lily Evans. Snape still had a cold face, and Lily pulled him to force two smiles at the corners of her mouth. Don't ask for a lot of good looks. Lily smiled gently. Hello Mrs. Weasley, Mr. Weasley, take the liberty to visit. This is a little heart. Mola, who was suspicious. You are? Lily returned generously. Lily, Snape, I am Severus's wife. I heard that there are many of my husband's students here, so I came to think. Not sure if it's possible. Molly nodded stunnedly. Arthur, absolutely, please. Green eyes, exactly the same person they knew before, and she had been looking at Harry consciously or unconsciously just now. At the dinner table, it was slightly embarrassing. Snape stared at Harry. Why don't you eat? That's my lady. It's rude for you kid to stare at people like this. Lily glared at him, helplessly holding the potatoes on the plate. Looking at Harry. Your name is Harry, aren't you? Yes madam, I'm Harry Potter. You, 10. Chapter 196. When Snape left with Lily Evans, the children in the room didn't react. But Harry was a little hesitant. That woman, he seemed to be very familiar. He has the same green eyes as himself, and he looks good. And it also gives him a sense of intimacy. It's clear. In the evening, Maury and Arthur lay in bed and couldn't sleep. You say, will it be her? Arthur leaned on the pillow and looked into the void, a question he wanted to know, and from the contact, he felt that this woman was Harry's mother. But reason told him that a dead man is a dead man. If anyone can resurrect a person who is already dead, it is no less to the wizarding world than another Merlin mage alive. Molly, you know that's impossible. Alas, sigh, even if it is her, I am afraid that 307 cannot say it openly. It's just embarrassing for Harry. The next day, the Magic Tower. Arthur Weasley intentionally or unintentionally asked Anson about the origin of Lily Evans, and Anson did not say it explicitly, but only said that she was Snape's wife. Today, Lily Evans also works inside the Magic Tower. Snape of the Chicken Thief knew very well that if there was any place in the wizarding world that was safe, it was probably Anson's Magic Tower. During the time that Anson left, he had a rough idea of Anson's family business. It's clear what the Magic Tower does. On the surface, it is the research place of the wizards under Anson. In fact, this Magic Tower alone can fight against all the forces he knows. It can be said that it is invincible to some extent. It just so happens that Lily Evans loves to study magic. Snape agreed to the decision. Wanda sat weakly on the side, and did not go to Diagon Alley along with the school telling her to go to Diagon Alley. It seems that the last time was also reluctant for you. Wanda didn't even lift her head. Indeed, if it weren't for the Infinity Stones, I might have been sucked dry. What do you say? While I wanted to resurrect her, not only were the Infinity Stones providing a huge amount of energy, but my own magic was also being extracted, and it seemed that the place where her soul was located was mysterious. It's also powerful. What if you were to resurrect another person? Wanda instantly understood the meaning of Anson's words. Do you suspect that it will take more power to resurrect those killed by the death-seeking curse, which can act on the soul spell? Anson nodded. This explains why it was so difficult for Wanda to resurrect Lily Evans. The power of the Infinity Stones is the power of the universe itself, which can be understood as infinity. To resurrect a human soul and body with such power, it should not cost too much. But the truth is not. Anson will have such a guess. In this way, there is something in it that is interfering with Wanda's ability. He can't say what it is, and he will study it slowly in the future. Quirrell walked in outside. Young master, Professor Dengbredo is here. Oh? Professor, long time no see. Dumbledore still looked so spiritual, giving people an unfathomable look. Anson, Miss Wanda, long time no see. With a wave of his hand, the tea automatically flew to the table where Dumbledore was sitting, signaling him to drink. Is it honey? As soon as he took a sip, Old Deng's eyes lit up. Anson nodded. Of course, specially prepared for the professor. Old Deng waved his hand, obviously liked this tea, but people have a nickname called Old B. Did the professor come to me for the Triwizard Tournament? Yes, Anson. Obviously you already know that the purpose of this Triwizard Tournament is probably not as simple as we see. There was a faint worry in his eyes. The fox looked at him suspiciously. Anson, the wizarding world in the Europa region has been completely controlled by the Death Eaters, and apart from the magical kingdoms in Black State and Mika, only our homeland is relatively stable. Professor, what are you worried about? Old Deng said with a little deep meaning. Worried? No, they had already submitted the list of people for this Triwizard Tournament, some of them Death Eaters. Wanda interjected. The professor means what they want to do with this Triwizard Tournament? Yes, I think the most attractive place for them now is the native wizarding world. Or rather, the Pendra family. Anson smiled and waved his hand. Closing parenthesis. Don't worry, Professor, you know, I have much more power than the public sees, but I hope the Ministry of Magic will prepare for it sooner. Of course, Minister Fudge is planning to retire recently, but I suggest he be 0.0 until next year. Fudge? If Old Deng didn't say anything, he would have forgotten about it. A greedy guy who was squeezed out by Old Deng to go to the Leaky Cauldron Bar is just useless. It's okay to be a person who attracts fire and takes on the role of backing. Old Deng Gang was about to continue talking, who expected Lily Evans to come up, still holding a thick notebook in his hand. Mr. Anson. Old Deng stood up with his mouth wide open. This is impossible. How is this possible? Lily Evans froze and then laughed. Anyway, she had to know, but she didn't expect to see Deng Bredo so early. You are? Lily, Snape. Hello sir. Old Deng pointed at her, and then at Anson. The smiling Anson gave him a gloomy and deep feeling at this time, and he had never been able to see through this student. If he had said that before, he would still feel that with his own ability, even if Anson did something unforgivable to the wizarding world, there would still be a means to change. But now, he wavered in that belief. The power that determines life and death should not be controlled by people. What's wrong? Lily handed over the note. This is the magic you want, and I rearranged it. He nodded apologetically at Old Deng and left the top. Dumbledore was still in shock and did not return to his senses, and Anson did not remind him. Opening the note, it was a note about the magic called 3.9 sex that saved Harry. It's not complicated. At first, Anson guessed that this magic was a type of cursed magic, and in fact it was, but at the cost of one person willing to sacrifice himself for another. Moreover, it needs to be blood relatives. It's old, and it's just as powerful. It was like imposing a state where Lily Evans somehow pulled Voldemort and Harry to a level. It's forcibly 5-5. For a long time, in the sound of Anson flipping through the notes, Old Deng came back to his senses. The eyes looked at him hopefully. Can you do me a favor? The corners of Anson's mouth rose. Professor, you are still degenerate. Also, no one can resist the temptation to resurrect a person, even the greatest white wizard. But I like your depravity. Chapter 197. Can you do me a favor? Those eyes, as if Anson had told Snape for the first time that he could help him resurrect Lily Evans, were so eager and full of guilt. Old Deng saw that Anson was unmoved, and added, as long as I can, I'm willing to pay any price. Professor, are you sure? A few faint words, but Old Deng seemed to have been drained of his strength. He was silent. Once he did, or Anson asked him to do something contrary to his ideas. What was the difference between him and Voldemort? And what about greatness? Suddenly laughed. Old Anson, I hope you prepare more about the Triwizard Tournament. Leave in a hurry. Wonder Fox was suspicious. What's wrong with him? 1. Sad story. Who does he want to resurrect? 2. Of course, who in this world doesn't have some regrets? But I'm afraid he can't pay this price. For Old Deng, it was nothing more than wanting to resurrect his sister. It should be okay for Wanda to rest for a while. The problem is that once Old Deng does this, it is directly negating his own life's efforts and persistence. It's a pity. Anson also hoped that the old O4 had agreed just now. It seems that it is not easy for the Lariang's family to get into the water. He had experience in persuading people to be good, such as the Death Eaters, who used to kneel when they fired a death curse. Don't. Wang Yi feared. She didn't want to come a second time to resurrect people. That feeling, being hollowed out. Anson smiled and did not speak. Raise your hand. The king's sword appeared in his hand, and Anson's eyes were strange. The secrets of this world were hidden when he completely took control of the weapon, and he already knew why Furuichi and Odin thought he was a dimensional demon god. Truly, King Arthur should have played a big game of chess. School. A rare experience of riding a train, whining and cuts train sounds. Anson looked out the window. He has been in the wizarding world for 4 years. Dilico. Anson, I heard that this year our defense against the dark arts class has changed. Another professor, an error from the Ministry of Magic. Yes. Well, what is it called? Mad-Eye Moody? Why are you paying attention to him? Dilico whispered. My father told me to be careful with him and stay away from him. You know, our family's relationship with the Death Eaters now. Very bad. Anson led Lucius and Malfoy's defection to Voldemort, and the Death Eaters were eager to give Malfoy's family a few death spells. Of course, the point is not here. The point is, it seems that the Malfoys still have some channels. The new defense against the dark arts professor has been replaced, but a Death Eater mixed in with a compound decoction. Little Barty. It should be him. Thank you for informing me. It'll be fine. Seeing Anson's determined expression, he did not continue. With Anson's ability, I am afraid that there are few opponents of him, let alone the powerful Pendra family. Whoever dares to touch the Pendra family is almost moving the stability of the native wizarding world. The school, as always, opened the ceremony. Old Deng said about the True Wizard Tournament, and the little wizards were very excited. If they didn't want to participate in the age limit and easy death, I'm afraid there will be no fewer people signing up. Night, Snape's office. I heard he went to you for Lily, Snape said lightly. Anson nodded. Well, but it seems that he is still insisting. He's not me. Of course. Professor Dumbledore will not become so easily bad, and I don't want him to become that kind of person, otherwise, his value will be lost. Snape looked up, sneered. Would you still want others to be better? Professor, just because I did something bad doesn't mean I can only do bad things. In fact, we're just trading. Yes, you are more like a demon in my eyes, luring others into the web you have already woven and swallowing it in one gulp. At least I completed our deal. Closing parenthesis. Snape sank his face. Lily's existence can't be known to too many people. I understand. She will be in the magic tower, and Old Deng will not say it. For some time to come, Hogwarts remained calm, even in the native wizarding world. Instead, traces of the activities of some dark wizards were slowly found around the Forbidden Forest. Listening to Hagrid, it seems that the face horse tribe has migrated deeper into the Forbidden Forest. The storm is coming. Young master. Gradually there are Death Eaters entering the native wizarding world through various channels, and since our people have not interfered, there are currently more than 30,000 Death Eaters who have come in. Have you got all your whereabouts? Quirrell nodded. All in control. If someone is unruly and cleans up, they should be here for the True Wizard Tournament. Maybe for us. Quirrell grinned. For them? The Death Eaters were still too young. A group of guys who can only throw away with wands, and they still want to dominate the entire wizarding world, and they don't know who gave them the courage. But any means will not choose this way. Perhaps because of the illusion that Voldemort has controlled the wizarding world in the Europa region. The problem is, the British wizarding world is so quiet that they haven't thought about why. What happened to the cloth 983 around the Forbidden Forest? It has already been arranged. Just when the time comes for them to attack the magic tower, those high level of the Ministry of Magic controlled by the Death Eaters have also been locked and can be cleaned up at any time. Secrecy. A few months later, the True Wizard Tournament is about to begin. Hogwarts had already prepared all kinds of decorations, when the young wizards heard that there would be other magical school students coming to join them until the end of the tournament. I am extremely happy. In particular, there is a big-mouthed gossip that is not from the Weasley family that Xperton School of Witchcraft and Wizardry is full of wizards. The explosive maniac Moxie also spent a gold galleon to buy the most valuable core message that there is a Veela bloodline in the witches. So, the male wizards got excited. Witches focused more on the Demustrang School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, which on the contrary was mostly male wizards. Many are Quidditch athletes. As a result of the premature secretion of hormones, Hogwarts is now almost full of waiting wizards. Wanda tilted her head in disgust. I don't know what is good looking. They don't know what it means dangerous. Anson smiled. Here it is. As soon as the words fell, a group of Pegasus appeared in the sky with vehicles, and dismissed their invisibility not far above Hogwarts. Chapter 198. When the evening comes, Hogwarts has another night full of joy in addition to the start of school and Christmas. Dumbledore introduced the young wizards to members from 2 other schools of magic. Delico leaned over and whispered that Karkaroff from Demustrang heard that he was a Death Eater. Anson nodded. In the position where the professor was sitting, Karkaroff had obviously looked at him several times, intentionally or unintentionally. It's really not hidden at all. On the other hand, Dumbledore, as if nothing happened. It's a pity. I wanted to try it, but my father wouldn't let me, and I heard that every time the True Wizard Tournament will have participants die. You want to go? Delico nodded directly. I don't think I'm going to be much worse than the so-called contestants. It's a bit of a coincidence. Moreover, when he was at home, the Malfoys had told him more than once not to get involved in this matter. In addition, there is an age limit for those who want to participate. Young wizards under the age of 17 are not allowed to participate. According to the arrangement of previous tournaments, there is a lot of danger in each level, and even many adult wizards may not be able to pass safely. The little wizards who can clear the level are all the best in the academy. Old Deng stood up and nodded to the 2 headmasters on one side and to the Fuji mascot who was the Minister of Magic. Loud voice, guys. The True Wizard Tournament is about to start, but before we start, we need to pick some candidates who are interested in participating. With a wave of your hand, magic surged on the Elder Wand, and a visible circle of light appeared outside a magical item in the center that was bubbling with blue flames. This spell detects the age of all players who want to participate in the tournament, and if anyone is interested in participating, put their name in it. Immediately, his face became solemn. Be careful, don't try to pass the magic test by other means, otherwise you will encounter disaster in the tournament. Anson ate dessert on his own. The whole academy was talking about the competition, as if they had automatically ignored the dangers that might be involved. The next day, Mr. Lacaux said that the Weasley brothers planned to enter the competition by putting their names on age enhancers. Unfortunately it did not pass. To Anson's surprise, when the contestants were unveiled, Old Deng took out a note with a name that he hadn't thought of. Harry Potter tilde. Old Deng walked directly to Harry in disbelief and held the note to his eyes. Harry, you put this in? It's not me, Professor, I don't. Are you sure? I'm sure, and I'm not old enough. Above, Karkaroff walked down. Well, is this Harry Potter? It's been a long time, but Professor Dumbledore, once the Triwizard Tournament contestants are selected, they cannot be changed. This is a tradition. Maxim, who was the principal of Xperton's School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, also said strangely, not bad. Old Deng turned his head to look at the two, but in this way, I'm afraid Hogwarts has one more contestant, which is not fair to you. Before Harry, there was already a little wizard, Cedric, who had confirmed the competition. The other two magic schools only have one person from each. If they need help, it will undoubtedly not be beneficial to them. The two nodded directly. It's okay, we are also curious about the magical savior, Mr. Potter. However, in between several discussions, a note was once again spit out on the magic item that selected the candidate. Floating in the air, Old Deng grabbed it in his hand, and this time, he was really stunned. Anson, Pendra. Oh, everyone around was in an uproar. Even Anson, who was standing on the side, did not think, is it necessary to do so? Obviously, he himself did not put his own name in it, so those who could do so were either Karkaroff and Maxim. After all, they are now unclear with the Death Eaters, which is very doubtful, or, it's Old Deng. Force yourself? He had already calculated that Harry's name would appear, and the only person who could protect him was probably Anson. Wanda looked incredulous. Anson, when did you do it? Didn't you say no interest? Perhaps, I repented. Turn around and go. No matter who did it, they misestimated Anson's strength. And watch and go. On the other side, in the principal's office, Old Deng raised his head from the meditation basin, and there was some teasing and anticipation in his eyes. Closing parenthesis recess. Hello Mr. Pendra, nice to meet you. Fleur stretched out her hand and looked at him with a smile. Anson raised his eyes. Hello Miss Fleur. He looked at the magic book in his hand again. Fleur was a little surprised. She herself has the existence of Vila bloodline. She is naturally able to seduce humans. Even if she can't be seducted, it is easy to gain the favor of others. This is a talent that comes with her bloodline. Unexpectedly, this wizard of the Pendra family was indifferent. I heard he never had a girlfriend in all these years. Crumb, who was sitting on the other side from D. Mustrang, laughed. I heard that Mr. Pendrew is very powerful. I don't know if I like Quidditch or not. Anson ignored it. In addition to looking a little embarrassed, there was also some warmth and anger. Just as he wanted to say something, Snape, dressed in black magic robes, had already walked over, and he had to bow his head. Late afternoon. No, Harry, I've looked up all the accounts of the tournament at Hogwarts, and almost every time someone dies, if that's all you do. She didn't say anything later. Harry spread his hands. What can I do? There should be no problem with Professor Dumbledore, right? Ron shook his head. Actually, the professors don't interfere in the competition, and there have been a few times before when the contestants have killed dragons. Harry, I think we need help. The three looked at each other. Wanda, Anson. The first sentence was said by Harry, and the last two sentences were by Ron and Hermione. Harry froze. No, why look for Anson? He is also a contestant. I think he has no reason to help me. You think he cares about that? Hermione said. Harry was silent. Then why should I care? Don't care that you may die, Harry. The name of the savior is of no use in the tournament. Ron blurted out. I don't really want to go to him, you know. He seems to have some opinion about me. Sigh. Magic Tower. Anson was still looking at the book. Quirrell on the side was reporting on various matters. The Death Eaters have a large number of people coming to the native wizarding world, and they are still approaching Hogwarts intentionally or unintentionally. And there are a large number of non-human intelligent magic species that are also approaching. Got it. Arrange the anti-phantom transfiguration charm outside the entire Forbidden Forest and Hogwarts. Don't activate it yet. Yes, young master. Chapter 199. Wow, Ron, you stepped on me. Sorry Hermione, it's scary in the Forbidden Forest. I mean, do we really need to come over? Harry, Hagrid told me there would be a surprise in the Forbidden Forest tonight, and I believe him. Maybe it is something to do with the tournament. The three were placed under the illusion charm by Hermione, which, although crappy and not powerful, was enough to hide the three of them. In the Forbidden Forest. Hermione opened her mouth. That's what Hagrid was talking about? Dragon? Ron, it's not just dragons, it's different dragons. Harry, I think even if you know what it is, you probably won't be able to deal with them. Dragons, even adult wizards need at least dozens or even hundreds to deal with. And the spells that their little wizards can master are always limited. Even Hermione. Harry calmed his face. Don't be afraid, we have the dragon skin magic robe produced by the Pendra family, which already has a great advantage over several others. What about Cedric? It seems that he is it, and I think the other two will have it too. The three looked at each other. They seemed to have forgotten that the dragon-breaking magic robe was sold throughout the wizarding world. Yes, this time Harry's advantage seems to be gone. Let's take it one step at a time. 3 days later, the True Wizard Tournament officially began. The principals of the 3 magic schools, as well as the jury and the high-ranking 367 of the Ministry of Magic, were present, and there were magic reporters from different wizarding worlds covering the whole process. Rita and Skeeter had just finished interviewing Anson flatteringly, and turned to face Harry with a less good face. "Mr. Potter, do you think you have the ability to pass the first level?" Harry shook his head. "I don't want to be interviewed." Rita, well, Teshing threatened not enough confidence to pass the first level. Twisted his waist to interview others. Cedric patted him on the shoulder. "Don't worry, in fact, we only need to get the golden egg under the fire dragon, not really going to fight the dragon." Gave a reassuring look. Harry was bitter and couldn't tell. Is it really that easy? Fudge and Old Deng walked in with a bag. "Everyone, come here, let's draw what kind of dragon we need to deal with, and the order of appearance. I believe you are ready." Fudge looked at Anson, who was standing on the side. "Mr. Pendra, you come first." "Of course." "Reach out and grab it." Fudge's face suddenly smiled, and he didn't know how happy he was. Several contestants breathed a sigh of relief. Well, the Eastern Fire Dragon, a symbol of strength and wisdom. Next, Oriental Fire Dragon. It is considered a top-notch existence among all dragons, larger in size, stronger in flame, although it is not toxic, but an Oriental Fire Dragon is basically worth several times that of a regular dragon. After the draw, Fudge again asked Anson to be the first to appear, and threatened what would fit his identity. Anson glanced at him and cut. This old boy is resenting him for letting Old Deng take the position of Minister of Magic. Be bold enough. Accompanied by cheers and a sound of wands releasing flowers exploding. Boom. After Rita took a photo, Anson lifted the curtain and walked out. Outside was a huge field, full of wizards, one by one, waiting to see how he would deal with a dragon. In the center of the field, a huge dragon with black scales and a huge body was roaring. Spit out flames from time to time. If it weren't for the iron cord on his body that restricted its activities, it is estimated that many little wizards would have died present. In the stands, Delico clenched his fists. Why didn't he move? Maybe you're observing a dragon? When I saw the Eastern Fire Dragon just now, I was a little frightened. It was too big. Inside the field, Anson watched with interest. With Anson approaching, the dragon suddenly fluttered its wings and flew over. Bang! The chain that tied it behind was instantly broken, and the huge body was pressed horizontally like a building toppling. However, Anson was unmoved. Just stand like that? Seeing that the dragon's open blood basin was about to bite his body, Anson punched him with a sharp wave of his hand. Bang! A muffled sound. The dragon stopped in front of him and shook its head, obviously in some pain. Immediately, as if angry, he opened his mouth. Closing parenthesis. The young wizards were too frightened to speak, while the professors had already stood up, and Snape raised his wand and aimed it at the dragon. If something goes wrong, he will definitely cast a spell. Boom, boom, boom. Dodged to the side, and instantly hit several punches again. After inscribed the rules of the dragon, Anson's body continued to grow stronger every day under the nourishment of magic. Moreover, after he completely controlled the Sword of the King, he even knew the secret of why Gu Yi and the others called him the Dimensional Demon God. This also represents the strengthening of his body. It is not limited to the various means by which he has become stronger in the past. Oh, what do I see? He's grabbing the dragon to fight? Yes, you read that right. I saw it too. Unbelievable. Karkaroff's face was ugly. Professor Dumbledore, this is a spell? No, it's just his physical strength. Old Deng smiled slightly. Rules of magic? It's magical, but far less magical than Anson. In the waiting area, a few contestants who did not start are already confused. Can they still do this? Fleur swallowed. I said, is he really human? Crumb subconsciously said, I don't think giants are necessarily that powerful. Cedric nodded. He also recognized this. Glancing at Harry, it seemed that he had also been given this inscription of dragon rules. But now it seemed that they were not as strong as Anson. Anson's physical strength is no less than that of a dragon. Magical. Keep beating. When the fight arose, Anson even came directly to the back of the dragon, grabbed its tail, and drank. After a violent roar, directly throw the dragon in the air and smash it to the ground. Little wizard, who is the dragon? Luna looked incredulously. Wonder, why do we all inscribe the dragon rules, but it seems that there is no power like Anson? Him? We can't be like him. Wonder knows something about Anson, such as Anson's performance at the moment. If they inscribed dragon rules or other magical rules, wizards only gave themselves one or more artificial talents. Then Anson is the blessing of one more dimension. Not in order of magnitude. According to Anson, once he fully controls this dimension, his power in this world is God. Even in the Marvel world, it is far from being comparable to ordinary superpowers. One flicked the dragon away and crashed into the stone, which turned to powder. Anson said indifferently, give you death. As soon as the words fell, the dragon who originally wanted to struggle suddenly froze, and then fell down. Dumbledore narrowed his eyes. This should not the power of wizards. Chapter 200. This should not the power of wizards, right? Dumbledore was a little suspicious. There was no obvious magic fluctuation, but it seemed to be like a magic spell. But it should be very powerful. Others can't see it, but he knows it well. This means that Anson's current strength may have surpassed him. Saying Merlin does not say Kun. This is only more long. Even when Anson first entered school, McGonagall said that this person was strange, came from or something. He didn't care. And at that time, Anson was obviously just a young wizard who had just entered school. Despite the potential, but some of the students who were more powerful than Anson in Hogwarts' thousand-year history were, such as himself. Oh, Anson, 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 Anson. In a series of cheers, Anson returned to the waiting room expressionlessly, nodded to the other little wizards and closed his eyes. The second to appear was Fleur. Compared to Anson, the challenger behind is a little embarrassed. Fortunately, even the most dangerous Harry got the golden egg without risk, and it can be regarded as possible, but it is far from as bright as Anson's performance. A little wizard who can hold a dragon and smash it as a toy. Presumably, in the future, Anson's resume will have another point that other wizards cannot forget. On the magic tower, Anson took out the king's sword again and looked at it. And there were some mysterious rules circulating on the simple stone texture of the sword body. The rules that Anson has been exposed to in the past are very different. For example, the dragon rule. For example, the rules that appear after wizards use spells. Although both are large and complex, they can still be broken down into the parts that make up their whole. But now the rules on the Sword of Kings seem to be a complex whole. Anson guessed that this rule represented the wizarding world, or it represents this dimension. It's just that it's not quite. Quirrell hurriedly walked in, and beside him stood a man Anson hadn't seen in a long time, Lucius and Malfoy. Young master, there is urgent information. With a wave of his hand, the Sword of the King disappeared. Mr. Malfoy, long time no see. Yes, Mr. Pendra, good day. Is there something going on? Malfoy's face was solemn. I want the people of the Malfoy family to enter the magic tower. Just my wife and Dilico. Anson was surprised. What's wrong? That man has already come to the native wizarding world, and although I have left the Death Eaters and his side, I still have some friends within the Death Eaters. Oh? Anson turned to look at Quirrell, who nodded at the same time. This meant that Quirrell had determined that this was true, and that Voldemort had really come in through all the other methods they were currently monitoring to enter the native wizarding world. Interesting. Of course, this news is worth this arrangement. You can tell them to come over at any time. Thank you for your generosity and kindness, Mr. Pendra. It's just a deal. I hope I didn't disappoint you. Malfoy left directly. He should have gone back to take Narcissa. As for Dilico at Hogwarts, nothing will happen in a short time. On the contrary, he and Narcissa are estimated to be troubled by Voldemort before long. A man who betrayed Voldemort could not tolerate him. Young master, the number of Death Eaters we have monitored has exceeded 50,000, and if Voldemort has other channels to come in, it is estimated that there are still many people we do not know. Don't panic. Quirrell bowed his head. Young master, do you need to transfer the Alchemy Wizard Legion in the Magic Tower? No, if we transfer them now, it is estimated that the Death Eaters will not come here. It's just that Anson is currently just leaving the First Wizard Legion in the mainland. Can it really be 10,000 wizards against more than 50,000 Death Eaters? To be honest, even he himself was a little unsure. The quantitative gap is too big. Anson didn't care. The 3 Infinity Stones were not decorations. This was Anson's confidence. However, at this moment, the performance of the wizarding world seemed to be very calm, and the tens of thousands of more wizards did not cause any waves. Novels. Just go to Felu closing parenthesis. It can be said that the Death Eaters either changed sex, or someone colluded with them. The True Wizard Tournament continues. In the second level, Harry had to call out to Anson after school. He was also informed that the second level may be held in the Black Lake. Anson nodded. I see. After saying that, leave. Ron shrugged. I just said he probably doesn't need our help, and to be honest, he didn't even say thank you. Ron. Hermione glared at him. Harry, how are you preparing? I don't know, at the moment. As far as I know, if you want to enter the Black Lake, there is no way. But I was told that I can seek Neville's help. Neville? On the day of the game. As soon as Dumbledore finished speaking, every contestant had an important friend who was placed in the Black Lake, and he could be considered important in the academy. It is estimated that there is only Wanda, right? But Wanda is now in the stands shouting cheers. Who's that? Looking at Old Deng blinked and said nothing. Several people jumped in one after another. Anson looked at Black Lake, a little disgusted, but just play a game. Just underwater. The light was a little dark. In addition to the fact that the closer you get to the bottom of the water, the more seaweed, you can vaguely see the remnants of some ancient buildings. Yes, ancient buildings under the water. I think this place should also be part of Hogwarts. Maybe someone has built a palace under the water before. Otherwise, who would dare to carry out such a big project so close to Hogwarts? It must be someone from Hogwarts. Huh? Anson saw a huge dark shadow in the distance. When he first came to Hogwarts, he seemed to see a black shadow under the Black Lake, a giant squid. Moreover, it is much larger than the regular squid. A normal giant squid is at most 10 meters, but this one, Anson looks at it from a distance, more than 30 meters in size. Fortunately, the Black Lake is connected to the open sea, otherwise this thing may really starve to death here. In the distance, Harry's gills resembled fish gills, which was a manifestation after eating the gills. He gestured for him to hurry up and rescue his classmates who were trapped here. For now, apart from Fleur's failure, even Harry is almost finished. Anson waved his hand, and Harry couldn't help but leave with Ron, leaving only Hermione and Fleur's sister. Anson was not in a hurry, but his figure quickly shuttled in the water to the giant squid. Roar! A loud roar. Under the huge body, several thick tentacles wrapped around Anson.